There is a scene in Revenge of the Sith that most people remember as the moment Anakin Skywalker decides to fall and then move past. The opera house on Coruscant, the strange aquatic ballet projected above them, Palpatine seated beside Anakin in the private box, leaning in, his voice lowered into something that sounds almost paternal. The galaxy is at war outside that box. The Jedi are losing. And in that quiet room, with the music playing, the Chancellor begins to tell a story. "Did you ever hear," he asks, "the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? A Sith Lord so powerful and so wise, he could use the Force to influence the midi-chlorians to create life. He could keep the ones he cared about from dying. The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. He became so powerful, the only thing he was afraid of was losing his power, which eventually, of course, he did. Unfortunately, he taught his apprentice everything he knew. Then his apprentice killed him in his sleep. Ironic. He could save others from death, but not himself. That is the scene most people remember. The seduction begins there. The Chancellor plants the seed. The Jedi lose Anakin in that opera box. And then the film moves on, into lightsabers and explosions and the inevitable wreckage of the Republic. But the scene is doing something stranger than seduction. Listen to it again. Palpatine is not just tempting Anakin with the promise of saving Padme. He is telling Anakin, in plain language, that the Sith murder their masters. He is telling Anakin that the dark side is built on betrayal. He is telling Anakin, the Chancellor himself, in his own voice, that an apprentice will eventually kill the man who teaches him. And Anakin does not hear it, or he hears it and does not understand what it means. That is the whole story of the dark side. It is always being shown to you. It is always telling you what it is. And the people who walk into it would do so with their eyes open and their hearing intact. And they walk in anyway, because the dark side does not need to lie. It only needs to be the answer to a question the listener has been asking for years. Welcome to TwinSuns. Settle in, dim the lights, find a comfortable position, let your breathing slow. This is a long one, and you do not need to hold on to every word. Let it drift over you. The dark side of Star Wars is not a magic system. It is not a color of lightsaber. It is not a costume choice. It is the most carefully constructed argument the saga has ever made about how good people become monsters, how institutions rot from inside, and how the line between a hero and a villain is almost never the line we think it is. Let us get into it. Most fans carry a version of the Sith around in their heads. The robes, the yellow eyes, the lightning, the hood, the hiss, Darth this and Darth that, a cult of evil wizards with red blades. That version of the Sith is not wrong. Exactly. It is just incomplete. It treats the dark side as a faction, as a team, as the bad guys in a story about good guys. And that framing misses what George Lucas was actually building when he wrote those films. The Sith Code, as it appears in the wider Star Wars canon, is short. It is a handful of lines. Peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion, I gain strength. Through strength, I gain power. Through power, I gain victory. Through victory, my chains are broken. The Force shall free me. That is the creed. That is the philosophy. And you do not need to know anything about the Sith Order to hear what that creed is actually saying. It is the philosophy of a person who feels chained, of a person who has been told, repeatedly, that the things they feel are wrong, of a person who has decided that the discipline being asked of them is just another set of chains, and that the only way out is to feel everything, all at once, with no apology and no restraint. Now hold that next to the Jedi Code. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. That is the Jedi philosophy in its full, ancient form. And the first thing to notice about it is that it is built almost entirely on denial. There is no emotion, there is no passion, there is no death. The Jedi do not say emotions can be mastered. They say emotions are not. They do not say passion can be channeled. They say passion is not. They do not say death can be accepted. They say death is not. That is a strange philosophy to teach a child. It is stranger still to teach it to thousands of children, and to take those children from their families when they are still infants, and to raise them in a temple where attachment is forbidden, and feelings are filed away as obstacles. The Jedi do not call this what it is. They call it serenity. They call it peace. They call it the way of the Force. But the show, and the films, and the books are not subtle about what is actually being done in that temple. They are raising soldiers who have been taught to be afraid of their own hearts. Think about what that actually means. A child is taken from their parents at the age of 1 or 2. They are raised by an institution. That institution tells them, gently and repeatedly, that the love they might feel for another person is a path to suffering. That attachment is the door through which evil enters. That to feel grief is to be in danger. That to feel anger is to be one step from monstrousness. The institution does not say these things cruelly. It says them with peace in its voice. It says them while smiling. It says them while the child is 6, 8, 12, 16 years old, and the child internalizes them, and the child grows up believing that the way to be good is to be empty. And then one day that child meets someone they love, and the entire foundation cracks. That is the gap the dark side is built to fill. The Sith Code is not an evil document. It is a wounded one. It is the philosophy of someone who looked at the Jedi Code and said, "You are asking me to be less than human. You are asking me to deny things that are real. You are asking me to call my own heart a weakness. And I will not do it. I will feel what I feel. I will love what I love. I will rage when I am wronged. And if that makes me a monster in your eyes, then your eyes are wrong." The genius of the saga, and this is being said carefully, is that this argument is not framed as obviously wrong. The Sith argument is allowed to land. The films show you, over and over, that the Jedi are missing something, that they have built a beautiful temple on a broken foundation, that they have mistaken their discipline for wisdom, that when the time comes to actually save the people they love, they do not know how, because they have spent 1,000 years training themselves to never need anyone. This is the first thing that needs to be said plainly about the dark side. It is not the opposite of the light. It is the consequence of the light being incomplete. It is the bill coming due on 1,000 years of denial. And the Sith are not invaders from outside the system. They are the system's own children, raised by the system, broken by the system, returning to the system with a knife. Hold that in your mind while we begin. In the 3rd season of the animated Clone Wars series, Yoda is sent on a look at the Force. He goes to the planet Dagobah. He sits in a cave. He confronts visions of himself. And in one of those visions, an older version of Yoda is asked, "What is the real difference between the dark side and the light side?" The vision does not give him a Jedi answer. It gives him something quieter. The difference, the vision suggests, is in the chooser, not in the Force. The Force is the Force. The choice of how to use it is the only thing that ever mattered. That answer reframes everything. If the Force does not have sides, if the Force is simply alive and present and available, then the dark side is not a place. It is not a current. It is not a thing that flows through certain people and not others. It is a relationship. It is the relationship between a being and the Force, when that being is using the Force from a place of fear, from a place of need, from a place of grasping, from a place where the goal of the action is to take something, to control something, to hold on to something that is slipping away. That is what the dark side is. Not lightning, not yellow eyes. The relationship, the orientation of the heart in the moment of contact. Two people can use the exact same Force ability, and one of them is light and one of them is dark, because one of them is reaching for connection and the other is reaching for control. That is the distinction. Everything else, the costumes and the colors and the cackling, is the surface. The actual dark side is internal. It is what is happening inside the person who is using the Force when they use it. This needs to be stated plainly. The dark side does not corrupt people. Fear does. Loss does. Grief does. The unprocessed weight of being a person in a galaxy that does not stop to let you process anything. The dark side is just the name for what happens when those weights are not put down. When the grief is not allowed to be grief. When the fear is not allowed to be fear. When the love is not allowed to be love. The unspoken thing turns. It does not turn because it is evil. It turns because it has nowhere else to go. That is the entire tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, and the entire tragedy of the Jedi Order, and the entire tragedy of every Sith who ever lived. They are not bad people who chose evil. They are wounded people who were never given the tools to live with their wounds. And the Sith, the actual organization, the cult of Darth this and Darth that, found those people in their moment of greatest need, and offered them a story that said your wounds are your strength, your love is your power, your grief is the engine that will save what you love. Come with us, we see you, the Jedi never did. That story is a lie, but it is a lie that is told to people who have been starving for it for years. If this kind of slow look at the things you love is what you came here for, a quiet subscribe makes a real difference to the channel. Then we keep going. Inside the opera scene is a story the film does not actually let you finish. Palpatine tells Anakin about Darth Plagueis the Wise. He tells him about midi-chlorians being shaped to create life. He tells him about the apprentice killing the master. And then the conversation pivots, and Anakin asks if a Sith can teach this, and Palpatine smiles, and the scene moves on. But the story Palpatine just told is the most important story in the entire prequel trilogy, and the audience is invited to walk past it. Sit with that for a second. The man telling Anakin the story is the apprentice in the story. Palpatine, who in the opera box is wearing the mask of a kindly chancellor, is Darth Sidious. The Darth Plagueis he is describing is his own master. The murder he is describing is a murder he committed. And the manipulation of midi-chlorians to create life, the ability to influence the very building blocks of the Force, is the ability that, according to the wider canon Lucas himself laid out, may have created Anakin Skywalker in the first place. That is what is happening in that opera box. The Chancellor of the Republic is sitting next to a young man whose mother gave birth to him without a father, who was foretold by Jedi prophecy to bring balance to the Force, and who has been promised since childhood that he is special, that he is chosen, that he is the one. And the Chancellor, in that quiet box, is gently letting that young man know that the specialness was probably engineered, that a Sith Lord, the Chancellor's own master, used the Force to manipulate life, and that the young man sitting next to him might be the product of that manipulation. He does not say it directly. He does not have to. He plants the seed and lets it grow on its own. That is the genius of Palpatine. He does not corrupt with shouts. He corrupts with stories. He spends 13 years, by the time of Revenge of the Sith, befriending a child, listening to him, validating him, telling him that the Jedi are afraid of him, telling him that the Council does not trust him because the Council sees how powerful he is. Every conversation is a thread. Every compliment is a thread. By the time Palpatine reveals himself as a Sith, Anakin is so tangled in threads he cannot move. Darth Plagueis, the character Palpatine describes in that opera box, has a strange existence in the saga. He never appears on screen. He is mentioned by name only in that one scene. He is fleshed out more deeply in a novel by James Luceno, published in the years after the prequel trilogy, which is no longer technically canon, but his shadow falls across the entire prequel trilogy. By most accounts in the wider lore, Plagueis was a Muun, a tall and skeletal alien from one of the worlds that gives the Republic its financial system. By most accounts, he was obsessed with conquering death. By most accounts, he was the architect of the political infiltration that eventually placed his apprentice Palpatine in the Senate seat for Naboo, then in the Chancellor's chair, then on the Emperor's throne. And the implication, never quite stated, is that Plagueis succeeded in his experiment, that somewhere in the lonely chambers of his estate, the old Muun reached into the Force and shaped life, and that life, when it was born, on a desert planet called Tatooine, to a slave woman named Shmi Skywalker, became the most powerful Jedi who ever lived, and then became Darth Vader. That is the story Palpatine is telling in the opera box. He is telling Anakin, you might be my master's creation. You might be the thing he built. You might be the very experiment that proves the dark side can do what nothing else can do. And the Jedi do not even know what you are. They have been training you to deny the thing that made you. They have been afraid of you since the day Qui-Gon Jinn brought you to the temple, because they can sense, on some level, that you are not natural, that you are made, that you are evidence of a power they cannot understand. The Jedi never tell Anakin this. They never explain why they are afraid of him. They never sit him down and say, we are uncertain about you because of where you came from, but we believe in you, and we are going to help you carry this. They just keep him at arm's length. Mace Windu does not want him on the council. Yoda counsels caution. Obi-Wan is given the task of training him almost as a deathbed wish from Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan accepts the task out of love for his master, not because he believes Anakin is ready for it. Anakin is raised inside an institution that is constantly, quietly, telling him that he is dangerous, And then the institution is surprised when he becomes dangerous. Palpatine knows all of this. Palpatine has watched it. Palpatine has nudged it. Palpatine is the person, the only person in the galaxy, who looks at Anakin and says, "You are not the problem. You are the solution. You are not too much. You are not enough. The Jedi cannot see what I see in you. Come to my office. Sit by the window. Tell me about your day. Let me hear what they did to you this time." That is grooming. The word should be said. The Star Wars prequels are, among other things, the most patient depiction of political and emotional grooming in mainstream blockbuster cinema. Palpatine grooms Anakin from the moment they meet on Naboo, when Anakin is 9 years old. He is still grooming him on the day of the opera scene, when Anakin is 22. He has been laying threads for 13 years. He has cultivated this relationship more carefully than any other relationship in his life, because Anakin is not just a potential apprentice. Anakin is the prize. Anakin is the most powerful Force user the galaxy has ever produced. And Palpatine, who orchestrated his own Clone Wars, who manufactured both sides of the conflict, who set every piece on the board, has been planning to put Anakin in a black suit since the day they met. This is the dark side at its most refined. Not lightning, not yellow eyes. A patient, deliberate, decades-long manipulation of a wounded child. A man who never raises his voice in the wrong moment. A man who always knows what the listener needs to hear. A man who is good at his job. And his job, when you strip it of all its political theater, is to harvest people. To find people in pain. To give them a story that makes their pain meaningful. And to use them up. The opera scene ends. The music continues. The aquatic ballet plays out above them. And Anakin Skywalker, in the dim light of a private box on Coruscant, takes the first conscious step toward becoming Darth Vader. He does not know it yet. He thinks he is having a conversation. He thinks the Chancellor is his friend. He thinks the story about Darth Plagueis is just a story, but the seed has been planted. The promise has been made. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a thought is forming. If the dark side can create life, the dark side can preserve it. If the dark side can preserve it, the dark side can save Padme. The whole apparatus of the Empire begins in that thought. A few scenes later, after Palpatine has revealed himself as a Sith Lord, after Mace Windu has come to arrest him, after the lightning has crackled and the windows have shattered, Anakin has to make a choice. He is standing in the doorway of Palpatine's office. Mace Windu is about to kill the Chancellor. The Chancellor is on his knees, hands raised, claiming weakness. And Anakin, in that moment, makes the decision that breaks the galaxy. He cuts off Mace Windu's hand. He chooses Palpatine over the Jedi. He chooses the promise of saving Padme over the rule of law. He chooses the story the Sith have been telling him over the story the Jedi never told him at all. And he chooses it not because he is evil. He chooses it because he is 22 years old, and he is exhausted, and he is in love, and he has been told by his teachers his entire life that the love he feels is a weakness. And then this kindly old man in front of him has been telling him for 13 years that the love he feels is his strength. And the kindly old man is the only person in the entire galaxy who has ever said that out loud. This is the dark side. This is the actual mechanism of it. Not magic, not curses. Loneliness. A specific kind of loneliness that comes from being raised by an institution that does not know how to love you, and then being found by a predator who is willing to pretend. The Jedi Order does not survive the next hour. Anakin walks back into the temple in the dead of night. He kills children. The clone troopers, on Palpatine's command, kill the Jedi across the galaxy. Order 66 fires through the network. Bodies fall on 100 planets. The 1,000-year temple at the heart of Coruscant burns. And by the time the sun rises over the city, the Jedi are functionally extinct, and the Empire is born. That is the cost of the opera scene. The audience watching it for the first time does not feel that cost yet. The conversation about Darth Plagueis is a quiet moment in a loud film. But everything that follows, every death and every loss and every line of dialogue in the original trilogy 30 years later, traces back to those few minutes in that opera box. A Sith Lord told a story. A young man listened. The galaxy did not survive what came next. In Revenge of the Sith, released in May of 2005, there is a moment where Anakin Skywalker walks across the floor of the Jedi Temple at night, and the camera holds on his face, and his eyes are not yellow yet. That is what is so unbearable about that sequence. He has not turned, completely. He has made a choice. He has helped Palpatine kill Mace Windu. And he has knelt and accepted the title of Darth Vader. But his eyes are still blue. He still looks like a person. He looks like the same person you have watched grow up across 3 films. The boy who fixed the droid in his mother's hut. The apprentice who joked with Padme in the meadow. The friend who saved Obi-Wan more times than he can count. And he is walking through the front doors of the temple at the head of a column of clone troopers, and he is going to kill children. The film does not soften this. The film, which has been criticized for many things over the years, does not soften this. Anakin walks into the council chamber, and the children are hiding under desks, and one of them steps out from his hiding place and calls Anakin Master Skywalker and asks what they are going to do, and Anakin ignites his lightsaber, and the camera cuts away. The next time you see the chamber, the bodies are on the floor. The next time you see a Jedi child, the body is in Obi-Wan's arms. The film does not show you the murders. It does not need to. The implication is enough. Think about what that scene is actually depicting. Anakin Skywalker, the person Obi-Wan has loved like a brother, the person Padme has built her life around, the person Yoda once described as having too much fear in him to be trained at all, walks into a building full of children he has known by name and kills them. Not in self-defense, not in a moment of rage, coldly, as an act of policy, because his new master told him to. That is the dark side, not a costume change, not a glow. The capacity, sitting in a person, to do something that cannot be undone. The capacity to break the line that should not be broken, and to keep walking afterward. The film treats this scene with a kind of dread that is almost theological. It does not give Anakin lightning. It does not give Anakin yellow eyes. It just lets him walk down the hallway, blue-eyed, with a lightsaber humming at his side, and lets you imagine what happens when the door closes behind him. The children are sometimes called the Younglings in fan discussion, because that is the term the film uses. The word feels strange. It is meant to feel strange. Lucas chose it deliberately, in his prequel-era world-building, to give a name to the youngest tier of Jedi initiates, the ones still in basic training, the ones who have not yet been assigned to a master. The word Younglings sounds almost soft. It sounds almost light-hearted, and the film uses that softness, that almost lightness, to make the violence land harder. Because what Anakin Skywalker does in that chamber is not the killing of warriors. It is the killing of students. It is the killing of children too young to defend themselves, too young to even understand what is happening, too young to comprehend why the hero they have been told stories about all their lives has walked into their classroom with a weapon. The youngest of them is, by the canonical timeline, around 4 years old. The oldest, perhaps 11 or 12. None of them are armed in any meaningful sense. None of them are a threat. Anakin kills them, and then he leaves Coruscant, and then he goes to Mustafar, and then he kills the separatist leadership. The killings on Mustafar, dragged out over a long sequence in the film's third act, are also presented in a strange way. Newt Gunray and the others are unarmed. They beg, they cower. Anakin cuts them down anyway. Palpatine has told him to. The Separatist Council, the political leadership of the war Anakin has been fighting for 3 years, is killed by him in a single room, in a few minutes, while they plead for their lives. He does not respond to their pleas. He just keeps moving. This is what the film is showing you. This is not seduction. This is not corruption. This is the consequence of corruption. Seduction was the opera scene. Corruption was the moment in Palpatine's office. What you are watching now, in the children's chamber and on Mustafar, is what a corrupted person does. The film holds your face in it. The film does not let you look away. And then Padme arrives, and Obi-Wan is hiding on her ship, and Anakin chokes her into unconsciousness on the lava platform, and the duel begins. The duel itself is one of the longest in cinema history. 12 minutes, by some counts, depending on how you measure the boundary between the duel and the surrounding scenes. It takes place on a volcanic planet whose lava flows are computer-generated and whose dialogue, in places, has been mocked for decades. But the duel, beneath the surface, is doing something the rest of the trilogy has been building toward. It is the moment when Obi-Wan Kenobi, the closest thing Anakin Skywalker has ever had to a father or brother, has to put down the person he loves. You can read Obi-Wan's face throughout the duel. He does not want to be there. He is not fighting to win. He is fighting to wear Anakin down, to find an opening, to make this end. And when it ends, when Anakin loses his legs and his arm, when he lies on the bank of the lava river burning and screaming, Obi-Wan does not finish him. He stands above him. He looks down at the person he loves. He says, "You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you," and then he leaves. This is the moment that should be sat with. Obi-Wan does not kill Anakin. He has the power. He has the moral justification. The man on the bank has just helped slaughter the entire Jedi Order, has murdered children, has choked his pregnant wife. By any standard, ending him would be the correct call. And Obi-Wan does not do it. He turns and walks away. He cannot make himself strike the killing blow. He cannot make himself end the person who was, until a few hours ago, his closest friend in the galaxy. That is one of the great moral choices in the saga, and the film does not underline it. Obi-Wan just walks. The camera lingers on Anakin, burning, hissing, the lava catching his robes. And then Palpatine arrives, the dark figure of him stepping out of the ship, kneeling next to the body on the bank. He has come to harvest his apprentice. This is the actual birth of Darth Vader, not the costume, the wound. The moment when there is so little left of Anakin Skywalker, so little of his body and so little of his soul, that Palpatine can pour him into a suit and have him be exactly what Palpatine has wanted all along. A weapon, a thing, a force-sensitive engine of fear with no remaining attachments, no wife, no brother, no mother, no order, no friends, just the suit and the master who put him in it. The film cuts to a medical theater on Coruscant. Surgical droids fit Vader for limbs. They lower the helmet onto his head. They seal him in, and the iconic breathing begins. The breathing James Earl Jones provides through that mask. The breathing that audiences associate so completely with Darth Vader that it has become one of the most recognizable sounds in cinema. But in that scene, on the table, that breathing is not iconic. It is the sound of someone who has lost the ability to breathe on his own. It is the sound of a machine doing for him what his body used to do. It is the sound of a person who is no longer a person, breathing because the machine refuses to let him die. Palpatine leans over the table. He tells Vader that he has been saved, that his strength has returned, that all is well. And then Vader asks the question. He asks about Padme, and Palpatine, with a face full of false sorrow, tells him that Padme is dead, that Vader killed her in his rage on Mustafar. And Vader, on the table, with the helmet just sealed onto his head and the breathing apparatus just beginning, lets out a scream that is barely human. That scream is the founding moment of the Empire. That scream is the sound of every choice made in the previous 3 films becoming permanent. That scream is the dark side, in its purest and most useful form, taking a man who used to be a hero and converting him into a tool. The grief that Anakin felt when he saw his mother die, the rage that he carried into the Tusken camp, the fear of losing Padme that drove him into Palpatine's office. All of it is now contained in a black suit with a respirator and no face. And it will serve the Emperor, without question, for the next 19 years. This is the gap that the films are building. The gap between the man who walked into the opera box and the suit that walks out of the medical theater is supposed to feel impossible. It is supposed to feel like an abyss. And the only thing that connects the two, the only continuous thread between Anakin and Vader, is grief that was never allowed to be grief, love that was never allowed to be love, fear that was never allowed to be fear. The Jedi did not teach him how to carry any of it. The Sith did. And the Sith answer to carrying it was to convert it, to weaponize it, to turn the man into the machine. Darth Vader, in the original trilogy, is presented as a monster. That is correct. He is a monster. He is the face of the Empire. He is the man who oversees the deaths of millions. He is the man who choked admirals for failure. He is the man who cut down Obi-Wan in front of his son. He is the man who tortured Han Solo on Cloud City. None of this is mitigated. The films are not asking the audience to forgive him for these things. The films are asking the audience to see, in the suit, the shape of the person who was put in it. To hear, in the breathing, the cost of what was lost. That is why the moment in Return of the Jedi, on the second Death Star, when Vader takes off his helmet and looks at his son with his actual face, lands the way it does. Because for a few seconds, you are no longer looking at Darth Vader. You are looking at Anakin Skywalker. The eyes are blue. The skin is pale and scarred and broken, but it is a human face. And the voice, when he speaks without the modulator, is just a tired old man. "Tell your sister," he says. "You were right." And then he dies. The prequel trilogy, taken together with the original trilogy, is the story of how a person gets put in that suit, and the story of how a person gets back out. Roughly 23 years between the suit going on and the suit coming off. More than 2 decades of service to an emperor who lied to him about everything. More than 2 decades of grief he was never allowed to put down. The dark side held him for that whole stretch, and the only thing strong enough to pull him out, in the end, was the recognition that his son was about to die. That his son was looking at him the way Padme used to look at him. That his son still believed, against all evidence, that there was good in him. That belief saves him, not redeems, exactly, because the bodies do not come back, but saves. It gives him the strength to lift the Emperor over his head and throw him down the reactor shaft. It gives him the strength to choose his son over his master, one final time, in reverse of the choice he made in Palpatine's office decades earlier. The dark side, in the end, can be unchosen. The grief, in the end, can be put down. The breathing apparatus comes off. The helmet comes off. And Anakin Skywalker dies with his son's hand on his face. That is the structure of the dark side, as Lucas built it. It is not a permanent state. It is not a damnation. It is a relationship with the Force that can be entered and, with enormous cost, exited. The cost in Anakin's case is more than 2 decades of service, the deaths of millions, and his own life. But the door is not locked. The door is never locked. That is the most important thing the original 6 films say about the dark side. The door is never locked, but most of the people who walk through it do not come back. Most of them die in the suit. Vader is the exception. The galaxy is full of Sith Lords and Inquisitors and dark side acolytes who walked through the same door Anakin walked through and never found their way out. The next sections of this video are about them. If you are still here, still listening, a subscribe is a small kindness that keeps work like this possible. Now, on. A version of Darth Maul exists only in The Phantom Menace, the film released in May of 1999, and that version is one of the simplest villains in the saga. He is silent for most of the film. He has perhaps 3 lines of dialogue. He is a red and black tattooed figure with horns and yellow eyes who fights with a double-bladed lightsaber and dies in the 3rd act, cut in half by Obi-Wan Kenobi, falling down a reactor shaft on Naboo. For a long time, that was the entire character, a weapon, briefly drawn, briefly broken, discarded. And then the animated Clone Wars series brought him back. Late in the 4th season of that show, in 2012 on Cartoon Network, an episode called Brothers aired, in which a pair of figures search a junkyard planet called Lotho Minor and find, in the wreckage at the bottom of the world, a half-mad creature crawling on 6 metal spider legs that have replaced his lower body. The creature is Maul. He has been alive, somehow, for over a decade after being bisected and dropped down a shaft. He has been hiding in his own madness, kept alive by the dark side, kept alive by hatred so pure it would not let his body die. That choice to bring Maul back, which Dave Filoni and the writers' room debated, and which George Lucas personally signed off on, transformed the character into something the original film never suggested. Maul stopped being a weapon. He became a story about what happens to weapons after their master is done with them. Look at what we know about Maul's life. By the version of the story told in the wider canon, he was taken from his mother as an infant. His mother was Mother Talzin, a Nightsister of the planet Dathomir, a witch with a complex relationship to the Force. Palpatine, who at the time was operating as Darth Sidious in deep cover, came to Dathomir and took the child. The child was raised in pain. He was tortured. He was trained to feel nothing but rage. He was taught that his only purpose was to serve. He was taught that his master's word was the only law. He was raised, deliberately and from infancy, to be a tool that did not know it was a tool. That is a horror that the films never quite stopped to acknowledge. Maul, the silent villain of The Phantom Menace, was a child once. A child taken from a mother who never stopped looking for him. A child shaped into an attack dog by the same man who would later shape Anakin Skywalker. The difference between Maul and Anakin is that Maul was groomed from infancy, with no other influences, no other voices, no Jedi temple to push against, and no friends to remind him of warmth. By the time Maul was old enough to fight, There was nothing left of the person he might have been, just the weapon Palpatine had carved out of him, and then Palpatine threw him away. That is the actual story arc of Maul, the one the animated show explores in depth across multiple seasons of Clone Wars and later Rebels. Once Palpatine met Count Dooku, once Dooku came over from the Jedi Order, Maul was no longer the most useful piece on the board. The rule of two, the doctrine that says there can only be a master and an apprentice, no more, no fewer, meant that for Maul to be replaced, he had to be discarded. And after Obi-Wan cut Maul in half on Naboo, Palpatine simply moved on. He never went looking for the body. He never confirmed the kill. He had what he needed in Dooku, and he was already laying the groundwork for Anakin. And Maul, the weapon he had spent decades sharpening, was simply forgotten. When Maul comes back in the Clone Wars animated series, that is the wound he is carrying. He has been thrown away. The master he served, the master he was built to serve, did not even check the body. Palpatine, in the universe of the show, does not even know Maul has been alive for over a decade until events force it into the open. Maul, when he discovers this, when he understands the depth of his abandonment, does not turn against the dark side. He does not become a hero. He doubles down on the dark side. He uses it to build a new family. That choice is the most revealing thing about him. Maul has every reason, after being abandoned by Palpatine, to walk away from the Sith entirely. He has every reason to recognize that the philosophy that built him was the philosophy that broke him. He does not. He cannot. Because the dark side, after a lifetime of grooming, is the only language he has. He does not know how to speak any other. So he gathers his brother, Savage Opress, around himself. He recruits the Death Watch on Mandalore. He builds the Shadow Collective, a criminal syndicate that operates in the gaps between the Republic and the Separatists. He plays his own long game, all of it driven by the simple need to be the one who matters, the one Palpatine should have valued, the one his master threw away. In the Clone Wars episodes that aired in early 2013, in an arc called The Lawless, Maul, having taken control of Mandalore, has captured Duchess Satine Kryze, the leader of the Mandalorian pacifist movement, and the woman Obi-Wan Kenobi loved decades earlier. Maul knows this. Maul has done the research. Maul has tracked down every personal connection in Obi-Wan's life that he can use as a wound. And he uses Satine. He lures Obi-Wan to Mandalore. He waits until Obi-Wan can see her. And then, in front of Obi-Wan, with Obi-Wan held by Mandalorian guards, Maul ignites his lightsaber and runs her through. The act is calculated. It is not done in rage. It is done as performance. Maul wants Obi-Wan to watch the woman he loved die, because Maul lost everything he loved, and the only way Maul knows how to even the scales is to give Obi-Wan the same wound he carries. He is not trying to win a fight. He is trying to inflict a permanent injury on the man who took everything from him. That is the dark side as Maul understands it. Not philosophy, not a path to power, just a way of returning pain. A way of making sure that the people who have everything do not get to keep it. A way of telling the universe that if Maul had to lose what he lost, no one else gets to keep what they have. Think about what that actually says about the dark side. It is not, in Maul's hands, a tool of conquest. It is a tool of equalization. It is the philosophy of a victim who has decided that the answer to victimhood is to make everyone else a victim too. Maul is not trying to rule the galaxy. He is trying to even the books. He has been wronged, and he wants the universe to acknowledge it, and the only language the universe seems to understand is violence, so he speaks violence, in every dialect, for the rest of his life. The final encounter between Maul and Obi-Wan is one of the strangest scenes in the saga. It comes near the end of Star Wars Rebels Season 3, in an episode called TwinSuns, aired on Disney XD in March of 2017. Maul has been searching for years for Obi-Wan. Maul has finally found him. They meet on Tatooine. They circle each other in the desert at dusk. They speak. The audience, expecting a long lightsaber duel, gets perhaps 3 exchanges. The blades meet. The fight is over in moments. Obi-Wan strikes Maul down. And then Maul, dying in the sand, asks if the figure Obi-Wan is protecting on the planet is the chosen one. Obi-Wan says yes. And Maul, dying, says, "He will avenge us." And then he dies, with Obi-Wan cradling him, gently lowering him to the ground. That last moment is doing something the show does not stop to explain. Maul, after a lifetime of rage, after decades of trying to inflict his own wound on Obi-Wan, after 100 episodes of revenge plots and dark side rituals, dies in Obi-Wan's arms. And the look on his face in the final shot is not rage, it is not satisfaction. It is something close to peace, because for the first time, the only time, in his entire life, there is someone with him at the end who is not using him for anything. Obi-Wan is not his master. Obi-Wan is not his enemy in this moment. Obi-Wan is just there, lowering him to the ground, witnessing the end of his life. That is the only kindness Maul ever receives, and it comes, in the final seconds, from the man Maul has spent decades trying to destroy. The show does not comment on this. It does not add music to tell you how to feel. It just lets the camera hold on the two of them in the sand, and then the wind moves through the dunes, and Obi-Wan stands up, and the scene ends. Maul is one of the great cautionary tales of the saga. He is what happens when a person is raised entirely by the dark side, when there is no Jedi temple in the background, no friend offering an alternative, no other voice in the head, when the only language ever taught is the language of pain. Maul does not get the redemption that Vader gets. He does not have a son to remind him of who he could have been. He does not have a Padme to mourn. He has only the wound, all the way down until the end. And the show, by bringing him back from his death in The Phantom Menace and giving him a full arc across more than a decade of stories, transforms him from a simple villain into one of the most tragic figures in the entire saga. A weapon, briefly drawn, discarded by its master, that crawled out of a junkyard on 6 metal spider legs and spent the rest of its life trying to find a reason to keep existing. That is the actual story of Darth Maul, and it is one of the clearest indictments of the Sith that Star Wars has ever produced. The Sith make their apprentices into tools, and when the tools break, the Sith do not mourn them. They do not even check the body. They simply find new tools. Maul, in the final analysis, is what Anakin Skywalker might have become if Anakin had never met Padme. If there had been no one in his life who loved him for who he was. The two of them are mirror images, both raised by Palpatine, in their own ways, both shaped into weapons, both used and discarded. The difference is the presence of a single person, in Anakin's life, who said, "You are more than what they made you." Maul never had that person, and so Maul never came back. There is a moment to sit with here, before the section closes. The dark side, in Maul's case, was not a choice, it was an inheritance. He did not choose Dathomir, he did not choose Palpatine, he did not choose to be tortured into a weapon. He was a child, and the adults around him decided what he would be, and by the time he was old enough to know what had been done to him, the dark side was the only home he had. Hating the dark side would have meant hating himself, so he loved the dark side, fiercely, until the day he died. Because the alternative was to look in the mirror and admit that the thing he had been made into was a monster. That is the most generous reading of Maul. And the show, by the end, asks the audience to hold it. Not to forgive him, not to absolve him, just to see him. To see that the dark side does not always recruit volunteers. Sometimes it just raises children and tells them they have no other option. And those children grow up into Sith, and the Sith do what they have been raised to do. And the cycle continues, until someone is kind enough to lower the dying body into the sand. In Attack of the Clones, released in May of 2002, Count Dooku appears at the end of the second act, robed and white-haired and elegant, played by Christopher Lee in one of the final great performances of his long career. Dooku descends a stone staircase on the planet Geonosis. He speaks in the measured cadence of a man who has been in rooms where the actual decisions are made. He carries a curved, hilted red lightsaber. He addresses Obi-Wan Kenobi, captive in front of him, with the polite courtesy of an old colleague. He offers Obi-Wan a deal. He offers him information about the Sith. He tells Obi-Wan that a Sith Lord has taken control of the Senate. Obi-Wan does not believe him. Obi-Wan thinks Dooku is lying, and the audience, who has spent the film building up Dooku as the leader of the separatist movement, the villain of the piece, the figure responsible for the assassination attempts on Padme, also does not believe him. The exchange ends. The scene moves on. The Battle of Geonosis begins. But Dooku was telling the truth. That is the strange and almost cruel joke at the heart of the prequel trilogy. Dooku was telling the truth in that conversation. There is a Sith Lord controlling the Senate. The Sith Lord is Palpatine. The Sith Lord is the man Obi-Wan and the rest of the Jedi Council report to every week. And Obi-Wan, hearing the truth from a man he assumes is lying, walks away from it. The truth, when it is offered to the Jedi by the wrong messenger, is a truth they cannot hear. That is one of the many small moments in the prequels that gain enormous weight on a second viewing. Dooku is not just a villain. He is a former Jedi Master. By some accounts, the head of one of the great Jedi lineages, the teacher of Qui-Gon Jinn, who was in turn the teacher of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Dooku trained the man who is standing in front of him on Geonosis. Dooku knows what the Order is. Dooku knows the names. Dooku knows the corruption. Dooku has, in his own way, tried to warn the Council, and the Council has not listened. That is the actual origin of Count Dooku's fall, the one the films do not have time to fully depict, but that the wider canon, especially Dave Filoni's animated work and the more recent novels, has built out. By most accounts in those stories, Dooku did not fall because he was secretly evil. Dooku fell because he was a true believer who watched the Jedi Order become something he could no longer recognize. He watched them ally with the corrupt Senate. He watched them participate in slave economies, on planets across the Outer Rim, without raising objections. He watched the Republic become an apparatus that served the interests of a few wealthy core worlds while the systems on the margins were ignored, exploited, left to suffer. And the Jedi, who were supposed to be guardians of peace and justice, were the Republic's enforcers in this arrangement. Their lightsabers were used to put down rebellions on planets the Senate did not want to lose. Their diplomats were sent to bring uncooperative governments back into line. Dooku looked at all of this and concluded that the Jedi were complicit, that the Order he had given his life to was no longer the Order he had joined, that the only way to fix the Republic was to break it, to force a crisis, to split the galaxy in half and make the Senate accountable for what it had become. That was the political logic of the separatist movement, the Confederacy of Independent Systems, when Dooku first founded it. It was not a Sith conspiracy from his perspective. It was a reform movement. It was a coalition of star systems that had been treated badly by the Republic and wanted out. It was an army of disenfranchised worlds, of corporate interests who saw an opening, of idealistic senators who had been quietly arguing for years that the Republic was no longer salvageable. Dooku gave them all a banner. He gave them all a face. He gave them all a story. The cruelty, the actual cruelty, of Dooku's life is that the entire movement he built was already controlled by his master. Palpatine, as Darth Sidious, had been laying the groundwork for the separatist crisis for decades. The discontent was real. The corruption was real. The Jedi's complicity was real. But the timing of the secession, the choice of leaders, the coordination of corporate guilds, the funding of the droid armies, all of it was orchestrated. Dooku thought he was leading a revolution. He was leading a controlled demolition. Palpatine wanted the Republic to descend into civil war so that he could be granted emergency powers. The Separatists were not the enemy. They were the trigger. And Dooku, the figurehead of the entire movement, was the most useful asset Palpatine had ever recruited, because Dooku was sincere. Dooku believed in the cause. And his sincerity was what made the cause believable. Think about what that does to a person. Dooku is a man who left the Jedi Order, gave up his lightsaber and his titles and his place at the table, walked away from everything he had ever known, because he believed the institution had failed. He went out into the political wilderness. He inherited his family's title and lands on his homeworld of Sereno. He built a coalition. He raised an army. He gave speeches. He did, by his own lights, the most important political work of his life. And the entire thing was a puppet show, and he was the lead puppet, and the strings led back to the very Senate he was trying to oppose. Did he know? That is the question the prequel-era stories spend a lot of time on. The simple answer is yes. Dooku, by the time of Attack of the Clones, knows he is Darth Tyrannus. He has knelt to Sidious. He has accepted a Sith name. He has been told, at least in broad strokes, what his role in the plan is. The longer answer is more complicated. Dooku knows he is serving Sidious, but he does not know the full shape of the plan. He does not know, for example, that the clone army the Republic uses against him was secretly commissioned by Sidious himself. He does not know that the clones have the order chips that will, at the end of the war, turn them on the Jedi and complete the elimination of the Order. He does not know that he is, eventually, going to be killed and replaced. Dooku thinks he is part of the plan. He is. But he is not the apprentice Sidious wants. He is the bridge. He is the temporary occupant of the apprentice's seat, holding it warm until Anakin is ready to take it. And he does not know this. Or he half knows it. Or he refuses to look at the implication directly, because to look at it would be to admit that he, like the Jedi Order he despised, has been used. That the same patterns that made him distrust the Council are the patterns that have captured him in service of a worse master. The death of Count Dooku, at the start of Revenge of the Sith, is one of the most quietly devastating scenes in the trilogy. Dooku is dueling Anakin and Obi-Wan aboard General Grievous's flagship. He has the upper hand for most of the fight. He knocks Obi-Wan unconscious. He is one strike away from killing him. And then Anakin, fueled by the rage Palpatine has been carefully cultivating for years, takes Dooku's hands off with a single cross strike, knocks him to his knees, and holds the Count's own red lightsaber to his throat. Palpatine is watching this from the captain's chair on the bridge. The whole scene has been arranged. The kidnapping, the duel, the moment of Dooku's defeat, all of it. Palpatine sits in the chair and tells Anakin to do it. Kill him. Do it now. And Anakin, looking down at the man who is kneeling in front of him with no hands and a red blade at his neck, hesitates for a moment, and then makes the choice that begins his fall. Dooku is killed by his own ally, by the apprentice he was supposed to be training, by the young Jedi he was supposed to recruit into the Sith Order if the long plan had gone the way Palpatine had told him it would. Dooku looks up, in the last seconds before Anakin strikes, and his face is the face of a man who has just understood, finally and completely, what has been done to him. He has been led to this room. He has been led to this kneeling position. He has been led to this death. The man in the chair, his master, his Sith Lord, has set him up to be killed by the next apprentice in the chain. The rule of two is not just a Sith doctrine. It is an execution schedule. The film does not give Dooku a final speech. He does not get to denounce Palpatine. He does not get to warn Anakin. He just looks up, with that final flash of recognition, and Anakin cuts off his head, and the body falls forward into the deck plates, and the Count is gone. That is the dark side's reward for loyalty. That is what the Sith do to their own. Dooku gave Sidious decades. He gave him the entire separatist movement. He gave him the political pretext for the entire war. He gave him the Empire, in everything but the name. And his reward was to be tricked into kneeling in front of a young man so that the young man could kill him and earn his place at the Master's side. The Jedi, who had spent the war fighting Dooku, did not get to see this moment. They did not get to understand what it meant. They saw Dooku's death as a victory. They saw it as the head of the snake being cut off. They did not realize that the actual head of the snake was the man who had ordered the killing. The actual head of the snake was the kindly chancellor whose chair Anakin was kneeling beside in the moments after the execution. Dooku is one of the great political tragedies of the saga. He is the man who saw, more clearly than any Jedi of his generation, that the Republic was broken. He was correct in his diagnosis. He was correct that the Order had become complicit. He was correct that something drastic was needed. And his correct diagnosis was hijacked, weaponized, and used to engineer the exact catastrophe he had been trying to prevent. The corruption of the Republic was not stopped by his rebellion. It was completed by it. The Sith took over the Senate because of the war he led. The Jedi were exterminated because of the army he created the pretext for. Every fear Dooku had about the Republic came true, in the worst possible form, because of his own actions. That is a particular kind of dark side ending, not the rage of Maul, not the corruption of Anakin, the bitter, almost philosophical despair of a man who tried to fix something and made it worse, who tried to be honest about what was broken and was used by the broken thing to break itself further. Dooku, in the moment before his death, has the closest thing to a complete view of the situation that any character in the prequels ever achieves. And what he sees, in that final flash of recognition, is that he was the instrument of the catastrophe he had spent his life trying to prevent. The dark side did not give him power. It gave him the role of useful fool, dressed in red robes, in someone else's plan, and it killed him when it no longer needed him. There is a quiet detail in the wider canon that is worth holding here. After Dooku's death, Palpatine continues to wear and use the dark side rituals Dooku had collected. Holocrons, texts, Sith artifacts. Dooku had been a scholar of the dark side. a serious student of its philosophy, a collector of its lore. Palpatine inherited all of it, the way an heir inherits a library, and used it for his own purposes. Dooku's legacy, the actual intellectual work of his Sith career, was absorbed into the Empire and put to work in the service of the Emperor. The Count's library outlived the Count. His ideas were used by the man who had used him. That is a particularly sharp ending, to be killed, and to have your work survive only as material for the person who killed you. Christopher Lee, who played Dooku in both films, and lent his voice to the character in the animated Clone Wars episodes until his death in 2015, brought an extraordinary dignity to the role. He played Dooku as a man who carried himself like a Jedi long after he had stopped being one. The posture, the accent, the deliberate slowness of speech. Lee, who had a long career playing villains who were aristocratic, intelligent, and self-deluding, understood Dooku better than the films sometimes had time to show. The Count he played was a man with a real philosophy, a real grievance, a real history. The fact that he was being used did not erase those things. The fact that he was being used made those things more painful, because he had earned them. He had built them, and they were being spent by someone else, for a purpose other than the one he believed in. If the pace of this is working for you, consider subscribing before we continue. It makes a real difference. On the edge of the galaxy is a planet called Dathomir, and the dark side has lived there for thousands of years, in a form that does not match anything else the saga has shown. Not Sith, not Jedi, something older, something that the Sith borrowed from and never quite mastered. The Nightsisters of Dathomir are witches. They use the Force, but they do not call it the Force. They call it magic. They draw it from the swamps and the red mists of their homeworld, from the bones of their ancestors buried in the soil, from rituals that involve blood and song, and the green glowing ichor of the planet itself. They are matriarchal. They do not serve a master. They serve each other, and the will of their coven, and the long memory of the dead. That is the world Asajj Ventress was born into. And it is the world she was taken from, before she could remember it, when her mother sold her into servitude to repay a debt. She was raised by a criminal warlord. She was orphaned again when the warlord was killed. She was discovered, as an adolescent, by a Jedi named Qui-Gon, who saw her Force sensitivity and trained her in secret on the planet Ratatak. She loved Qui-Gon. He was the first stable adult in her life, and then he was killed in front of her by bounty hunters. And the small dark space that Ventress had been carrying since her infancy opened up into something much larger. The Asajj Ventress who appears in the Clone Wars animated series, voiced beautifully by Nika Futterman from 2008 onward, is a character whose backstory is built on a stack of losses. Her mother sold her. Her warlord guardian was killed. Her Jedi master was killed. By the time Count Dooku finds her, she is a young woman who has been training herself in the dark side out of grief, in the ruins of Qui-Gon's small Jedi outpost, using whatever scraps of his teachings she remembered, and twisting them with her own rage. Dooku tells her she is wasted on Ratatak. Dooku tells her she should come with him, and Dooku takes her on, in secret, as his apprentice. That word apprentice is doing a lot of work in this story, because Dooku is already an apprentice. Dooku is Darth Tyrannus. Dooku belongs to Palpatine, and the Sith rule of two does not allow for an apprentice to have an apprentice. So Ventress, when she comes to Dooku, is technically illegal under Sith law. She is Dooku's secret. She is being trained, in private, for purposes Dooku has not fully explained to his own master. And when Palpatine finds out, eventually, he is not pleased. The way the show handles this is one of the great quiet betrayals of the Clone Wars era. Palpatine, on discovering Ventress's existence, tells Dooku to kill her, not because she has failed, not because she has betrayed anyone, because she is too powerful, because the Sith cannot allow a third dark side user to grow strong enough to challenge the master and apprentice. Palpatine wants Ventress dead, and he wants Dooku to be the one who does it. The order is given. Dooku has to comply. The episode in which this happens, an installment from the third season of the animated Clone Wars titled Nightsisters, aired in January of 2011 and was directed by Giancarlo Volpe, written by Katie Lucas, who is George Lucas's daughter. It is a remarkable piece of television. Dooku lures Ventress onto a battlefield. He arranges for her to be ambushed by Republic forces, with her own ship trapped, her own escape routes cut. He has decided, in effect, to have her killed by collateral damage so that he does not have to do it himself. He does not have the stomach for the direct execution. He just wants the problem to disappear. Ventress survives. Barely. She drags herself out of the wreckage, and she realizes, in the moments after, what her master has done. The man she has served for years, the man who took her off the dead-end planet where she was wasting away, has just tried to have her assassinated to please his own master. The dark side has run its calculation again. The apprentice has been deemed inconvenient. The apprentice has been ordered to die. Ventress does what Maul, in his own way, will do years later. She does not turn away from the dark side. She doubles down, but she does it differently. She does not seek revenge through grand political schemes or coalitions of villains. She goes home. She goes back to Dathomir. She goes back to the Nightsisters she was taken from as an infant, and she finds her mother, who is still alive, and she begins to learn the old magic. This is one of the most beautiful arcs in the entire Clone Wars run. Ventress, the dark side assassin, the bald and pale woman with two curved lightsabers, comes home to a coven of witches who recognize her instantly. They take her in. They paint her face in white markings. They sing her into a ritual. They invest her with the magic that is her birthright, and for the first time, perhaps in her entire life, she is part of something that is not transactional. The Nightsisters do not want to use her. The Nightsisters want her to come home. The dark side, in this brief moment, is something else. It is not Palpatine's tool of conquest. It is not Dooku's intellectual exercise. It is not Maul's revenge weapon. It is a culture, a history, a community of women who have practiced a particular relationship with the Force for 10,000 years, on a planet most of the galaxy has forgotten about. And the show, by giving Ventress this homecoming, suggests that the dark side does not have to be the Sith. There are other shapes it can take. There are other things people can do with it. And then, of course, the Sith destroy it. The arc that follows is brutal. Mother Talzin, the leader of the Nightsisters, decides to take vengeance on Dooku for what he did to Ventress, and for his abandonment of her son Maul. She sends Ventress to assassinate him. The attempt fails, and in retaliation, Dooku and Palpatine send General Grievous and a full Separatist droid army to Dathomir. They land, they burn the villages, they cut down the witches, they flood the swamps with droids. The Nightsisters fight back with everything they have, with magic, with bone weapons, with the reanimated dead, and they are slaughtered. The episode where this happens, Massacre, aired in February of 2012 as part of the 4th season of the Clone Wars series, and is one of the bleakest pieces of children's television ever broadcast. The camera holds on the burning villages. It holds on the Nightsister bodies. It holds on Ventress, standing in the ruins of her home, the only survivor of her coven, the last living witch of a 10,000-year tradition. Mother Talzin escapes. A few others survive in hiding, but the culture, as it had existed, is gone. The dark side, in this gentler and older form, is exterminated by the dark side in its Sith form. The Sith do not tolerate other practitioners. The Sith do not share the dark side. They wipe out everything that is not them. Ventress, after this, becomes a wanderer. She has no master. She has no coven. She has no community. She drifts to the criminal underworld and becomes a bounty hunter. Her arc continues, more quietly, over the next few seasons. And eventually, in the canonical novel Dark Disciple, published in 2015, written by Christie Golden, based on unfinished Clone Wars scripts, she has a romance with a Jedi named Quinlan Vos. They are sent on a mission together to assassinate Dooku, of all people. The mission goes wrong. Vos is captured. Ventress turns him back from the dark side at the cost of her own life. She dies protecting him from Dooku's lightning. She is buried on Dathomir, in the ground of the coven that was destroyed. That is one of the few clean endings in the dark side's story. Ventress dies saving someone. She dies, in effect, in the act of letting go of the rage that had defined her life. The Nightsister magic allows her to reach across the divide to Vos. The dark side is not what saves him. Her love for him is, and the love costs her everything. Sit with that for a second. The dark side did not give Ventress anything in the end. It took her mother. It took her teacher. It took her master's loyalty. It took her coven. It took her culture. It took her body. The only thing she got back, the only thing she was allowed to keep, was the choice she made in the final seconds of her life. The choice to use what she had become for something other than revenge. The choice to die saving someone instead of being killed by someone. That choice is the closest thing to peace any Darksider in the saga ever gets, with the possible exception of Anakin's final moment with Luke. And the fact that Ventress, of all characters, gets it is one of the great quiet gifts the writers of the Clone Wars gave the audience. She is not the most prominent villain. She is not the most powerful. She is not the most narratively important, but she is one of the most fully drawn. Her arc, from the desperate young apprentice on Ratatak, to the assassin in service to Dooku, to the homecoming witch on Dathomir, to the broken bounty hunter, to the woman who dies for love, is the most complete look at the dark side anyone outside the Skywalker family ever takes. The Nightsisters, as a culture, also tell us something important about what the dark side is. They tell us it is not, fundamentally, a Sith invention. The Sith did not create the dark side. The dark side is older than the Sith. It is something that exists in the Force, that can be touched by anyone who is willing to touch it, that has been practiced by different traditions in different ways across thousands of years. The Sith are one expression of it. The Nightsisters are another. There are hints, scattered through the wider canon, of dark side cults that operated entirely outside Sith control, of Force users on planets the Jedi never charted, of practices and rituals and bloodlines that the Sith did not invent and could not fully suppress. The dark side, in other words, is a phenomenon, not an organization. The Sith took ownership of it for a long stretch of galactic history, but they did not have a monopoly on it. They had to maintain the monopoly through violence, through erasure, through the elimination of every other tradition they encountered. The destruction of the Nightsisters on Dathomir is one example of that pattern. There are others. The Jedi, in their long history, encountered and contained or destroyed many small dark side traditions, sometimes without realizing what they were doing. The Sith, in their long history, did the same with even more brutality. That is a different and more uncomfortable framing of the dark side than the films usually offer. The dark side, in this view, is not the property of the bad guys. It is a real and powerful aspect of the Force that different cultures across the galaxy have related to in different ways. Some have used it for warfare. Some have used it for ancestor worship. Some have used it for healing, in the old Nightsister sense of bone working and spirit walking. The Sith chose to use it for conquest, and in doing so, they did more damage to the broader landscape of darkside practice than the Jedi ever did. One final thought to hold here, before we move on. The Nightsisters of Dathomir, after the massacre, were not entirely extinct. The wider canon makes it clear that small enclaves survived. Mother Talzin reappears in later Clone Wars episodes. The Bad Batch animated series, which premiered in May of 2021, returns to Dathomir in its later seasons and finds Nightsisters still living there, still practicing, still rebuilding. The Ahsoka live-action series, which premiered in August of 2023, introduces a Nightsister named Morgan Elsbeth, who has survived into the era of the New Republic and is working alongside the remnants of the Empire. The dark side, in its Dathomirian form, is not gone. It is just patient. It is waiting. It outlasts the Sith. It will outlast whatever comes next. In the first season of Star Wars Rebels, which premiered on Disney XD in October of 2014, a tall, pale figure in dark robes walks slowly through the corridors of a Star Destroyer. He carries a circular double-bladed lightsaber. He has yellow eyes and dark facial markings and pointed teeth, and the calm, almost theatrical voice of a man who has been doing his job for years and finds it neither difficult nor distasteful. He is called the Grand Inquisitor. He was voiced in the show by Jason Isaacs. He was played in live action almost a decade later by Rupert Friend in the Obi-Wan Kenobi limited series that aired on Disney Plus in the summer of 2022. The Grand Inquisitor has a small role in the early structure of the Empire. He hunts Jedi. Specifically, he hunts the Jedi who survived Order 66, the ones who escaped the Temple Massacre, the ones who went into hiding in the years after the Republic fell. He hunts the children who were Force-sensitive but had not yet been brought to the Temple. He hunts the older Jedi who survived but never fought back. He hunts the small remnant of the Order that scattered across the galaxy after the Purge, and one by one, he brings them in or kills them. That is the Inquisitorius. That is the order Vader was given at some point in the early years of the Empire, to find and train a core of fallen Jedi, to use them to track down their former colleagues. to weaponize the dark side against the light. The Inquisitors are not Sith. They are not bound by the rule of two. They serve Vader, who serves the Emperor. They wear dark armor. They carry the signature double-bladed lightsabers that can spin like fan blades. And every one of them, every single Inquisitor in every story Star Wars has ever told, started life as a Jedi. Sit with that for a second. The Inquisitors were not recruited from criminals. They were not picked up off the streets. They were not Force-sensitive children who got swept up in the new Empire. They were Jedi. They were people who had lived in the Coruscant Temple. They were people who had been Padawans, who had taken the trials, who had earned the title of Knight or in some cases Master. They were people who had said the Jedi Code in their daily meditations. They were people who, when Order 66 came down, did not die. They survived, and then, instead of going into hiding, they made a different choice. They took the Empire's offer. The wider canon does not always make explicit what that offer looked like, but the implication, across the various Inquisitor stories that have been told, is consistent. Vader, or Palpatine, or some other senior figure in the Imperial structure, came to these surviving Jedi and gave them a choice. Submit or die. Train under us or be hunted. Tell us where the others are hiding or be tortured until you tell us anyway. And these Jedi, who had been raised in the temple to believe that they would die before they betrayed the Order, made the calculation that survival was worth more. They renounced their old name. They put on the black armor. They became Inquisitors, and they were sent back into the galaxy to hunt their friends. That is a particular kind of horror that the Star Wars story has been slow to fully explore. The Inquisitors are not just former Jedi. They are friends who turned. They are people who fought beside other Jedi in the Clone Wars. They are people who shared dormitories in the temple as children, who sparred together as apprentices, who knew each other by name. And then the Empire came, and some of them died, and some of them ran, and some of them made the trade. And the ones who made the trade were sent after the ones who ran. The Grand Inquisitor, in the live-action series, is given a small backstory in dialogue. He was, according to lines spoken in Rebels and confirmed in Obi-Wan Kenobi, a temple guard before he turned. The temple guards were the Jedi assigned to the inner security of the Coruscant Temple, the ones who maintained order, who handled disputes, who guarded the Holocron Vault. They were Jedi, but they were also, in a sense, the police of the Jedi Order, and the Grand Inquisitor was one of them. He stood watch in the halls. He saw the corruption that the Council did not want to look at. He saw the gap between what the Order claimed to be and what it had become. And when Order 66 fired, when the clones came up the steps of the temple, the Grand Inquisitor did not die. He survived. He made his choice, and the Empire welcomed him. The dialogue in the show implies that he resents the Jedi, that his turn to the dark side was not just survival but, in some sense, revenge. The Order had been hypocritical. The Order had betrayed its own principles. The Order had used him as security personnel, rather than letting him train as a fully recognized knight. He had grievances. The Empire knew about them. The Empire used them. The Empire gave him a black uniform and a new title, and a license to take out every old frustration he had ever carried against the Order. And he took the offer. And he became, in his own twisted way, satisfied. That is a different kind of dark side narrative than the saga usually offers. The Inquisitors are not seduced by a kindly old chancellor over 13 years. They are not raised as weapons from infancy. They are not victims of grand political conspiracies. They are adults. They are competent. They are Jedi who knew exactly what the Code said about loyalty and integrity and selflessness, and who decided that the Code was not worth dying for. They made the calculation. They took the offer. And the Empire turned them into a death squad. The video games Jedi Survivor and its predecessor Jedi Fallen Order, released by Respawn Entertainment in 2019 and 2023, give us one of the most fully developed Inquisitor characters in the canon, the second sister. Her real name is Trilla Suduri. She was a Padawan before the Purge. She was the apprentice of a Jedi named Sarah Junda. When Order 66 fired, Sarah protected her, hid her, tried to get her off Coruscant. But Sarah was wounded. Sarah was, in the chaos of the moment, captured. And under torture, in an Imperial interrogation, Sarah broke. She gave up Trilla's location. She told the Empire where her own apprentice was hiding. And Trilla, the Padawan, was taken by the Empire and turned into an Inquisitor. That is the specific cruelty of the second sister's story. She was given up by the Master who loved her, the Master who, by all accounts, would have died protecting her, broke when the pressure was applied. And Trilla, when she found out, when the Empire told her, did not blame the Empire. She blamed her Master. She blamed the entire Jedi Order for being weak, for being unable to protect its own, for being a paper tiger that crumbled the moment the Sith came knocking. She put on the armor and the helmet, and she went looking for her former master, not because the Empire told her to, but because she wanted to. When Trilla and Cere finally meet again in the Fallen Order game, the scene is one of the most painful pieces of dark side drama in the entire canon. Cere is no longer with the Empire. Cere has been hiding for years, broken by guilt, unable to even touch the Force anymore. Trilla finds her on board the small ship they have been using as a hideout. The two of them face each other. Cere apologizes. Trilla does not accept the apology. The blades come out. The duel begins. And it is not a duel between hero and villain. It is a duel between a teacher and a student, both of whom are right and both of whom are wrong, both of whom have been broken by the Empire in different ways. And at the end of it, Trilla is killed by Darth Vader himself, who appears in the doorway, dispatches her for her failure to kill the protagonist, and walks on. That ending is doing something the saga rarely does. It is showing you that the dark side does not protect its own any better than the light side did. The Inquisitors, who renounce the Jedi to serve the Empire, are not safer. They are not stronger. They are not respected. They are tools. They are expendable. When Trilla fails her mission, the Master she served does not protect her. The Master she served kills her, and as she dies in Cere's arms, the Empire that took her in is already moving on to the next Inquisitor. The next Padawan, somewhere, will be captured. The next series will break. The cycle continues. The Obi-Wan Kenobi live-action series, which aired in May and June of 2022, gives us a different kind of Inquisitor in the character of Reva, the third sister, played by Moses Ingram. Reva is one of the few Inquisitors whose origin is not just former Jedi. Reva, the show reveals over the course of its 6 episodes, was a youngling. She was one of the children in the temple on the night Anakin walked in. She survived by hiding under the bodies of her dead friends. She survived by playing dead while Anakin and his clones walked through the chamber. And she has spent the rest of her life trying to position herself close enough to Darth Vader to kill him. That is the long game of Reva. The Empire thinks she is loyal. Vader thinks she is loyal. She has spent more than a decade infiltrating the Inquisitorius, climbing the ranks, doing everything the Empire asked of her, in order to get close enough to Vader to strike. The horror of her story is that she has had to become an Inquisitor, with all the killings and torture that implies, in order to put herself in position for a revenge that may never actually be possible. She has had to do, to other surviving Jedi, exactly what Vader did to her. She has had to kill children herself. She has had to hunt the same people Vader is hunting. And the entire time, she is telling herself it will be worth it when she gets to him. The Kenobi series, in its final episodes, gives Reva a different ending than most dark side characters get. She fails to kill Vader. She is left for dead. She is found, broken, by Obi-Wan. And in the show's last act, she is sent to kill a young child named Luke Skywalker, on Tatooine, on Vader's orders, and she finds the child. She raises her lightsaber, and she does not strike. She cannot do it. She has spent her whole life telling herself she has not become what Vader is. And in the moment when she is about to kill a child in his bed, she sees Vader in the act she is about to commit. She sees the same monster she has been chasing for a decade. And she puts the saber down. She walks out of the house. She walks out of the Empire. She walks out of the Inquisitorius. She walks out of the whole structure that had been holding her up. And the final shot we get of her is of her sitting alone in a desert, with her dark robes loose around her shoulders, weeping. That ending is, for an Inquisitor, almost unprecedented. It is the only redemption arc the Inquisitorius has ever produced, and the show, by giving it to Reva, suggests something the Star Wars stories often hint at, but rarely fully say. The dark side is not actually a permanent contract. The Inquisitors, like the Sith, can walk away. The cost is enormous. The years cannot be unspent. The deaths cannot be undone. But the choice to stop, to put the saber down, to walk into the desert, is always available, right up until the moment of death. The door is never locked. Most of the Inquisitors die without ever finding that door. The Grand Inquisitor falls into the burning wreckage of his own ship in the first season of Rebels, after losing a duel to Kanan Jarrus, telling Kanan that there are things far worse than death before he is consumed by the explosion. The fifth brother and the seventh sister are eventually killed in the later seasons of Rebels, and in tie-in material. The eighth brother dies in a fall. Trilla dies in Seer's arms. The whole order, by the time of the rise of the rebellion, is largely depleted. Vader, who built them, watches them die without grief. They were tools. The tools broke. He will find new tools. The Inquisitorius is one of the most pure expressions of what the dark side actually does to the people who serve it. It takes their pasts and weaponizes them. It takes their grievances and feeds them. It gives them a uniform and a purpose and a master, and it sends them out to do work that, on some level, every one of them knows is monstrous, and it discards them, one at a time, as they fail. And the master who built them never mourns them. The master who built them never even slows down. With training, with turnover, and the people doing the work were former Jedi who had decided that surviving was worth more than dignity. And the people running the program were Sith Lords who had been doing this kind of thing for 1,000 years and had it down to a science. If you would like more videos in this register, a subscribe is the simplest way to ask for them. Then we move forward. A question the saga circles for a long time before it answers is whether the Jedi Order, the institution at the heart of the Republic, actually deserved to fall. Most fans, on a first viewing of the prequel trilogy, would say no. The Jedi are the protagonists. They are the heroes. They have been doing their best in difficult circumstances. They were betrayed by a conspiracy that went deeper than anyone realized. They were murdered by their own troops, in their own temple, by clones who had been engineered with inhibitor chips that activated on a single command. The fall of the Jedi is presented, in Revenge of the Sith, as a tragedy, as an injustice, as something the universe did to good people who did not deserve it. That reading is not wrong, but it is incomplete, and the wider canon, especially the Clone Wars animated series and the more recent stories that take place in the years immediately before the Purge, complicates it considerably. The Jedi Order, by the end of the war, was not the same institution that had existed 1,000 years before. It was something else, something smaller, something more brittle, something that, when the pressure came, broke in places it never should have broken at all. The 6th season of the Clone Wars animated series, which aired on Netflix in early 2014 after the original cancellation of the show by Cartoon Network, addresses this directly. The arc is sometimes called the Lost Mission. In it, a clone trooper named Tup begins, without warning, to attack a Jedi general in the middle of a battle. He kills her. He has no memory of the act afterward. He has not been compromised by separatist forces. He has not been bribed. He has not been programmed by any enemy the Republic recognizes. He simply, in a moment, lost control of himself and killed a Jedi. The Jedi Council sends Anakin and others to investigate. Trauma, brain scans. The medical droids find something strange in Tup's skull. A small artificial structure embedded in his brain tissue. Foreign material. Something that should not be there. The investigation continues. Other clones are scanned. The same structure is found in all of them. Every clone trooper in the Republic Army, the army that has been fighting alongside the Jedi for 3 years, has an inhibitor chip implanted in their brain from birth. The chips were built into the cloning process on Kamino. They were always there, and under the right conditions, the chips will activate and the clones will turn on the Jedi. A clone trooper named Fives uncovers this. He learns the truth. He tries to bring it to Anakin. He tries to bring it to the Council. And before he can fully explain what he has found, he is killed. Shot down on Coruscant by other clones. In a confrontation, the Jedi do not have time to investigate properly. The truth dies with him. The Council, distracted by the war, never follows up. The chips remain in every clone, undetected, waiting for the order that will activate them. Think about what this means. The Jedi were warned. The Jedi were given a chance, a year before Order 66, to discover the conspiracy. And the Jedi missed it. Not because they were stupid, not because the warning was hidden, because they were too busy, because they were stretched too thin, because they had been running the war for 3 years, and they had stopped paying attention to the small things. The small things, in this case, killed them all. That is one of many moments in the wider story where the Jedi's actual failure becomes visible. They did not see Palpatine because they were running the war. They were running the war because Palpatine had manufactured it. The Council had become so focused on military operations, on tactical questions, on the day-to-day management of an enormous and unsustainable conflict, that they had lost the perspective that would have allowed them to step back and see what was happening. They had become, in the language of the saga, soldiers. And the Jedi, the show is at pains to remind us, were never supposed to be soldiers. They were supposed to be peacekeepers. They were supposed to be diplomats. They were supposed to be the people who arrived at a conflict and convinced the parties to stop fighting. They had become the opposite. They were generals now. They commanded armies. They led charges. And the more they did that, the further they drifted from what they were supposed to be. Yoda himself, in Revenge of the Sith, says something close to this. The dark side clouds everything, he tells Mace Windu. The Council can no longer see what it once could. The connection to the Force has been weakened, and the audience, watching this, can read it as a comment on Palpatine's growing power. But it is also, on a deeper level, a comment on the Jedi themselves. They have weakened their own connection. They have made choices, year after year, that took them further from the path. They have allowed the institution to become rigid. They have allowed dogma to replace wisdom. They have allowed fear to replace serenity. They are using the words, but the meanings have drained out of them. This is the gap that the Sith exploit. The gap between what the Jedi say they are and what they have become. Palpatine, in the years before the war, was able to operate in plain sight on Coruscant because the Jedi were no longer seeing clearly. They sat on the Council and conducted business as usual. They listened to Palpatine's briefings without sensing the abyss in front of them. They debated the war's progress without feeling the wrongness in the room. The dark side had grown so close, so present, so deeply embedded in the structure of the Republic itself, that they could no longer distinguish it from the background. And the Sith, in their patience, waited. The Clone Wars series gives us another arc, late in its run, that drives this point home with painful precision. The Mortis arc, from Season 3, takes place on a strange and mythical planet where the Force itself takes physical form in the bodies of three beings: the Father, the Son, and the Daughter. The Son is the dark side. The Daughter is the light side. The Father keeps them in balance. And Anakin, on this planet, is told plainly that he is the chosen one, that he is the only one who can keep the balance, that his role in the cosmic structure is not a metaphor, but a literal fact about the universe. This arc, written by Christian Taylor, takes the prequel prophecy that has been hanging over the entire saga, the prophecy of the one who will bring balance to the Force, and makes it real in a way the films never have time to. The Jedi, the show suggests, have misunderstood the prophecy. They have read it to mean that Anakin will destroy the Sith and restore order. But the actual reading, the one the Mortis arc points toward, is darker. Balance is not the elimination of the dark side. Balance is the relationship between light and dark, held by a being who can move between them. The Chosen One is not the destroyer of the dark. The Chosen One is the keeper of the boundary. And the Jedi, who have been telling themselves for 1,000 years that they are the protectors of the light, have been operating on a misunderstanding of what their own prophecy actually means. When the prophecy fails, when Anakin falls instead of bringing balance, the Jedi Council does not pause to reconsider their interpretation. They keep going. They keep running the war. They keep trusting the Senate. They keep trusting Palpatine. They keep teaching their young about a path that was already, on some level, broken. And when the Order comes, the Order Palpatine has been preparing for decades, the clones turn and the Jedi die and the temple burns, the Order does not even get the chance to understand why. That is the actual tragedy of the Jedi. Not that they were betrayed. They were betrayed, certainly, but they were betrayed because they had spent generations putting themselves in a position to be betrayed. They had centralized themselves on Coruscant. They had bound themselves to the Republic. They had allowed their numbers to dwindle, from tens of thousands in the height of their power to perhaps 10,000 by the time of the Clone Wars, scattered across the galaxy and stretched thin by an unsustainable conflict. They had concentrated their leadership in a council that met in a single chamber, in a single building, on a single world. They had given Palpatine the perfect target, and when he pulled the trigger, the target was destroyed in a single night. Order 66, the command itself, is one of the most chilling moments in the saga. It is depicted in Revenge of the Sith as a montage. Palpatine, in his office on Coruscant, gives the command quietly into a comm channel. The clones, on planets scattered across the galaxy, receive it, and in each location, the camera lingers on the Jedi for a moment before the killing begins. Ki-Adi Mundi on Megiddo, leading his troops over a snowy ridge, turns to see his clones aiming up at him. He has time, just barely, to ignite his lightsaber. He is gunned down. Aayla Secura on Felucia, walking through the jungle with her clone commander beside her, hears the shift in the troopers' movement. She turns. They open fire. She falls into the underbrush. Plo Koon, in his starfighter above Cato Nemoidia, is shot down by the fighters of his own escort. His ship breaks apart in the upper atmosphere. He does not even have time to understand what is happening. The montage is silent except for the music. Lucas does not give the Jedi final speeches. He does not give them long looks of betrayal. He gives them, instead, the small moment of confusion, the half-turn, the brief recognition, and then the blasters, and then nothing. That is the actual death of the Jedi Order. Not in a battle, not in a confrontation. In a series of small, almost casual murders performed by the people who had been their closest comrades for 3 years. The clones were not evil. The clones were not, in any meaningful sense, choosing to do this. The chips in their brains activated, and they killed the Jedi they had been serving alongside, and most of them never knew why. Some of them, in the canonical tie-in stories, would later have the chips removed and would carry the knowledge of what they had done for the rest of their lives. Most of them would just go on, in service to the Empire, never quite understanding the act they had performed. The Jedi Order, in a single night, was reduced from 10,000 to fewer than 100. By the time the dust settled on Coruscant, by the time Vader had led his clones through the temple, and Mace Windu was dead, and Palpatine had announced the formation of the Empire to the Senate, the entire order was effectively destroyed. The survivors, mostly knights who had been on remote assignments far from any clone garrisons, would spend the next 19 years in hiding. The Inquisitors would hunt them down, one by one. The Empire would consolidate. The dark side would settle into the role it had been preparing for all along, the role of the official religion of the galaxy. The Jedi, in their own way, had handed the dark side the entire galaxy on a tray. They had built the institutions that made centralization possible. They had built the republic that the Empire would inherit. They had built the army that would be turned against them. They had built the temple that would burn. They had even, in some sense, built the chosen one who would lead the killings. Anakin was raised by them. Anakin was trained by them. Anakin was told, by them, that the things he felt were wrong, and that the love he carried was a danger, and that the woman he wanted to save was an attachment he had to release. The Jedi did not corrupt Anakin, but the Jedi made him, in a very specific way, available to be corrupted. They made him a man who was starving for the validation Palpatine eventually offered him. This needs to be stated plainly. The dark side did not destroy the Jedi Order from outside. The dark side flowed in through the cracks the Jedi themselves had opened. The institutional failures, the doctrinal rigidity, the unwillingness to question the prophecy, the willingness to lead armies, the blindness to the political corruption surrounding them on Coruscant. The Sith found those cracks. The Sith used them. The Sith did the work of destruction, but the cracks were already there. That is one of the most uncomfortable truths the saga lays out. The light and the dark are not separate institutions facing each other across a clean line. They are interpenetrated. They use each other. They feed each other. The Jedi's failures created the conditions for the Sith's success. The Sith's success was made possible by what the Jedi had become. And the cycle, the show repeatedly insists, did not begin in the Clone Wars, and did not end in the rise of the Empire. It had been turning for 1,000 years before, in the long centuries between the Old Republic Sith Wars and the time of Anakin. It would keep turning for at least a generation after, into the time of Luke Skywalker and Ben Solo and Rey. The dark side does not need to defeat the light. It only needs to wait, in the cracks, until the light has weakened itself enough for the cracks to widen. That is the lesson the prequels are quietly teaching. The lesson that, on a first viewing, almost everyone misses, because the films are so full of lightsabers and battles and grand political events that the slow internal rot is hard to see. But on a second viewing, on a third viewing, On a careful walk back through the entire trilogy, the rot becomes the actual subject of the films. The Sith are not the antagonists, the rot is, and the Sith are simply the symptom of the rot becoming visible. At the end of Rogue One, the standalone film released in December of 2016, there is a hallway scene that may be the single most concentrated depiction of the dark side that the saga has ever produced. The scene lasts about 3 minutes. There is no dialogue. There is, for most of it, no music. There is just a corridor in a rebel ship, a group of rebel soldiers carrying the stolen Death Star plans, and a black figure at the end of the hall whose lightsaber ignites in the dark. Darth Vader, in this scene, is not the man on the throne in Cloud City. He is not the father at the end of Return of the Jedi. He is something the original trilogy never quite showed us. He is the working tool of the Empire, doing his actual job, in real time. The rebels in the corridor are not soldiers in any meaningful sense. They are crewmen. They are people who have been handed the data tape and told to get it to the bridge. They are running. They are scared, and Vader walks toward them, slowly, with the lightsaber in his hand, and the lightsaber is the only source of light in the hallway. He kills them, all of them, one after another. The lightsaber moves almost casually. The bodies fall. Some of the rebels try to fight back. They fire blasters. Vader stops the bolts in midair with his open hand. He flings men into the ceiling with the Force. He throws them against the walls. He cuts them down. And the entire time, his face is a mask. His breathing is steady. There is no rage in him. There is no satisfaction. There is only the work and the methodical performance of it, and the slow advance down a corridor where everyone is going to die. The director, Gareth Edwards, has spoken about this scene in interviews as a late addition to the film. The original cut of Rogue One ended differently. The hallway scene was added in reshoots, was filmed in only a few days, and was placed at the end to give audiences a moment they had been waiting for since the original Star Wars was released in the late 1970s. A moment that showed what Vader actually does. Not in metaphor, not in dialogue, not in the careful chess of the original trilogy, where his villainy is mostly suggested. The full thing. The reason the Emperor kept him alive in the suit for more than 2 decades. The reason the rebellion feared him. The reason his name, by the time of A New Hope, was already legend across the galaxy. The scene works because of what it withholds. Vader does not gloat. Vader does not pose. Vader does not even seem particularly invested in the killing. He has been doing this for many years. He has done it on countless ships, in countless corridors, to countless people. The rebels in front of him are not even individuals to him. They are a problem. They are between him and the data tape. He needs to remove them, so he is removing them. The Empire's job, the dark side's job, is finally visible in its purest form. Not philosophy, not seduction, not grooming, just labor. The labor of fear. The labor of removing obstacles, one at a time, with absolute efficiency, until there are no more obstacles. That is the empire that Darth Sidious built. That is what the dark side, in its final political form, is for. Not the cackling lightning of the throne room, not the grand schemes of the prequel trilogy. The corridor, the methodical work in the corridor, the men dying in the dark while a man in a black suit walks toward them. That is the actual day-to-day of the Empire. That is what the dark side, when it has won, looks like in operation. A doctrine, named for Grand Moff Wilhuff Tarkin in the wider canon, captures this in policy form. The Tarkin Doctrine, the idea that the Empire should rule through fear of force rather than through force itself, that the actual application of violence is expensive and inefficient, and that the demonstration of violence, the threat of violence, the publicly visible willingness to use violence is cheaper and more effective. Build a Death Star, destroy a single planet, demonstrate what you can do, and then the rest of the galaxy, knowing what you can do, will fall in line on its own. The actual violence is rare, the fear of the violence is constant, and the fear keeps the systems quiet. That is the operating philosophy of the original trilogy. Tarkin, the Imperial Governor played by Peter Cushing in A New Hope, lays it out in dialogue. The destruction of Alderaan, the peaceful core world that he orders blown apart in front of Princess Leia, is not an act of military necessity. It is a demonstration. It is a message to the rest of the galaxy. He picks a planet that has done nothing wrong. He destroys it. 2 billion lives, gone in a single moment. in a single beam of green light, in a single shot from the Death Star. The film, in 1977, treats this with surprising restraint. Leia, played by Carrie Fisher, watches her homeworld die. Her face barely moves. She is not given a moment of grief on screen. The film cuts away. The plot continues. But the audience, watching, understands what has been shown. The Empire is willing to destroy entire worlds. The Empire is willing to commit genocide as a policy decision. The Empire has been doing this kind of thing, in smaller forms, for 19 years by the time of A New Hope. And the Death Star is just the culmination of the doctrine. The dark side, in its imperial form, treats the destruction of a world the way a military bureaucracy treats the firing of an artillery shell, as paperwork, as routine. This is the dark side at scale. The original trilogy, by focusing on the small handful of heroes who oppose the Empire, can sometimes obscure the scale. But the wider canon, especially the recent live-action shows like Andor and the various tie-in novels, have been increasingly honest about what the Empire actually is. It is not a cool aesthetic. It is not the badge of a fan club. It is a totalitarian apparatus that has, by the time of Rogue One, been running the galaxy for almost 2 decades. It has prison planets. It has labor camps. It has a secret police, the Imperial Security Bureau. It has an intelligence service that disappears people without trial. It has work programs for political dissidents that grind them into raw materials over the course of years. The Empire is, in every meaningful sense, a fascist state, and it is the dark side, given an army and a budget and a capital, doing what the dark side has always wanted to do. The Andor series, which premiered on Disney Plus in September of 2022, makes this point with extraordinary clarity. The show, created by Tony Gilroy, follows a character named Cassian Andor in the years before he appears in Rogue One, and the world it depicts is the Empire as actually lived in. The Empire is not, in Andor, a distant villain. It is the air the characters breathe. It is the bureaucracy that processes their tax forms. It is the police force that monitors their neighborhoods. It is the corporate system that owns their workplaces. It is the prison they end up in when the wrong officer notices them in the wrong place. The Empire is everywhere, and it is mundane, and the mundanity is exactly what makes it terrible. There is a prison arc in Andor's first season that may be the single most accurate depiction of how the dark side operates as a political reality. The character is sent to a prison facility called Narkina 5. He has done nothing wrong. He was in the wrong place. He was arrested on a minor charge and sentenced to 6 years. The facility is automated. The inmates work in shifts, assembling unknown components. The shifts are competitive. The squad that produces the most parts each day gets a small reward. The squad that produces the least gets electrocuted. The floors are smooth and white. The guards are minimal. The prison runs itself. And the prisoners, when they finally complete their sentences, are simply transferred to another facility. They are never released. The Empire does not believe in releasing prisoners. It believes in keeping them productive. That is the dark side. That is the actual policy of the dark side, when the dark side has won. It is not lightning. It is a prison floor. It is a man assembling components for a Death Star he does not know is being built. It is a sentence that does not end. It is a bureaucracy that has decided that human beings are inputs to a production process, and that production processes do not stop, and that prisoners, like raw materials, are not really people in any way the system needs to recognize. Vader is the face of this empire, but Vader is not the most evil figure in it. Vader is, in some sense, the cleanest. He kills people in front of him. He kills them quickly. He uses a lightsaber. The men who run the prison on Narkina 5 do not even meet the prisoners. They send orders through a network. They process the inmates the way an automated warehouse processes packages. The cruelty is distributed. The cruelty is anonymous. The cruelty is institutional, and no single person feels responsible for any specific act of it. That is the dark side as a managed system. That is what Palpatine built. The original trilogy, with its focus on Vader and the Emperor, sometimes lets the audience believe that the dark side is a small problem. A handful of bad actors. Take out the 2 of them and the galaxy is saved. The wider canon has been correcting that misunderstanding for decades. The Empire is not the Emperor. The Empire is a system, with millions of officers and trillions of credits, and a culture, and a future, and an entire generation of citizens who have been raised to believe in it. Even after the Battle of Endor, even after the Emperor's death in Return of the Jedi, the Empire does not simply vanish. It fragments, it survives, it rebuilds, it returns. The animated series The Bad Batch, which premiered in May of 2021 and concluded in 2024, follows a squad of clone troopers through the early years of the Empire. The show, set immediately after Revenge of the Sith, documents the conversion of the Republic into the Imperial system, the slow militarization, the replacement of the clones with conscripted human stormtroopers, the construction of new prison facilities, the disappearance of political dissidents, the early stages of what will eventually become the totalitarian apparatus of the original trilogy. The show, by spending 3 seasons on this transition, shows the audience how a dark side regime actually consolidates power. Not all at once, slowly, with patience, with each step justified by the previous step, with the population gradually adjusting to each new restriction until the restrictions feel normal. That is the long game of the dark side. Not the seduction of a single Anakin, the seduction of an entire galaxy. The patient work of convincing trillions of beings that the new order is the only order, that the way things are now is the way they have to be, that fighting back is futile, that the rebels are terrorists, that the Empire is just doing what is necessary. Palpatine, in his Senate speech at the end of Revenge of the Sith, frames the rise of the Empire as a response to a Jedi rebellion. The senators applaud. Padme, watching from the gallery, says quietly that this is how democracy dies, with thunderous applause, and the dark side spreads outward from that chamber across the galaxy, and the applause covers the sound of every cell door closing for the next 19 years. If you find value in this kind of slow look at the things you love, a subscribe is appreciated. And now, onward. In The Last Jedi, the second film of the sequel trilogy, released in December of 2017 and directed by Rian Johnson, the audience finally gets to see the moment Ben Solo became Kylo Ren. The scene is told 3 times, from 3 different perspectives, in 3 different versions. In the middle of the film, Luke Skywalker tells it once, then he tells it again, with more detail. Then Kylo Ren, in a Force-bond conversation with Rey, tells it a 3rd time, from his side. And the film, by giving the audience 3 versions of the same event, makes a point that the original trilogy never quite had time to make. The truth of a turning to the dark side is not one event. It is a relationship between events. It is the gap between what one person remembers and what another person remembers. It is the place where memory and trauma diverge. The event itself is simple. Luke Skywalker, in the years after Return of the Jedi, has rebuilt the Jedi Order. He has gathered a handful of Force-sensitive students. Among them, his nephew Ben Solo, the son of Han and Leia, born after the fall of the Empire. Ben is powerful. Ben is the most powerful student Luke has ever had, perhaps the most powerful since Anakin. And Luke, late one night, looks into Ben's mind while the boy is sleeping. He senses something. He senses the dark side. He senses what Ben could become. He senses Palpatine, somehow, still alive in some form, reaching for the boy across the years. And for a single instant, before he can stop himself, Luke ignites his lightsaber. He does not strike. He does not actually kill Ben. He stands over the bed with the blade ignited, and he sees, in his own reflection in Ben's eyes, what he is about to do. And he stops. He puts the blade down. He turns to walk away, but Ben has woken up. And what Ben saw, in the half-second between waking and Luke's hand letting go of the saber, was his uncle standing over his bed with a weapon. The teacher he had trusted, the man his mother had told him stories about all his life, standing over him, with a green blade, about to kill him. That is the wound. That is the actual wound from which Kylo Ren is born, not Snoke's manipulation, which came later, not the seduction of the dark side, which had been pulling at him for years. The wound is Luke. The wound is the moment Luke, even for an instant, considered murdering his own nephew in his sleep. And Ben, in that moment of recognition, makes the decision that defines the rest of his life. He tears down the hut. He kills the other students. He flees into the night. And he goes to find the master who has been whispering to him through the dark since he was a boy, the master named Snoke. The Last Jedi handles this scene with surprising compassion. Luke does not try to justify what he did. In his second telling of the story, after Rey has accused him of being a coward, Luke admits that for a moment he thought killing Ben might save the galaxy. He thought, briefly, that the dark side in his nephew was strong enough to require preemptive action. And then he hated himself for the thought. And he hated himself even more when he realized that the thought itself, that single half-second of consideration, had created the very monster he had been trying to prevent. Think about what that means. Luke Skywalker, the man who refused to kill his own father in Return of the Jedi, the man who threw away his lightsaber on the second Death Star and declared himself a Jedi like his father before him, found himself, decades later, standing over his nephew's bed with a saber ignited. The film does not let Luke off the hook for this. The film makes Luke sit with what he did, but the film also, crucially, does not let Ben off the hook for what he did afterward. The fact that Luke considered killing him does not make Ben's response, the slaughter of the other students, the burning of the temple, the years of murder under Snoke's flag, justified. The two things exist in tension. Luke was wrong, Ben was wrong, and the dark side, in this gap between their two wrongs, made itself a home. That is what makes Kylo Ren one of the most interesting dark side characters the saga has produced. He is not a victim, in the simple sense that Maul was. He is not a fallen idealist, in the way Dooku was. He is not a groomed weapon, in the way Anakin was. He is a young man with a real grievance against the people who raised him, who took that grievance and made it the centerpiece of an entire identity, and who chose, deliberately and with full awareness, to become the worst possible version of himself in order to punish the people he believed had wronged him. Kylo Ren is, throughout the sequel trilogy, performing. He wears a helmet that he does not need to wear. He uses a voice modulator that he does not need to use. He carries a crossguard lightsaber that he built himself, with a deliberately unstable design that makes the blade hiss and spit and look more dangerous than it actually is. Every choice he makes, in his presentation, is theater. He is dressing up as his grandfather. He is trying to be Darth Vader. He keeps Vader's melted helmet in his quarters and talks to it. He prays to it. He asks it for guidance. And the helmet, which is just a piece of melted plastic from a cremation, of course says nothing back. That detail is one of the great quiet jokes of the sequel trilogy. Vader's helmet, the relic that Kylo treats as sacred, is from a corpse that Luke burned on Endor at the end of Return of the Jedi. The body that was inside the helmet, Anakin Skywalker, had renounced the dark side in his final moments. Anakin died as a Jedi. The helmet, the relic Kylo prays to, is the relic of a man who came back. Kylo, in worshipping it, is missing the point of his own grandfather's life. He is worshipping the suit. He is missing the man who took the suit off. The Force Awakens, the first film of the sequel trilogy, released in December of 2015 and directed by J.J. Abrams, gives us the central scene of Kylo's arc. Halfway across a bridge inside Starkiller Base, Han Solo, who has come looking for his son, stands on one end. Kylo, with his red blade humming in his hand, stands on the other. The two of them walk toward each other. The music swells, the lighting is red. They meet in the middle, and Han, in a soft voice, calls his son by his name, not Kylo, Ben. He says he wants Ben to come home. The scene that follows is one of the most painful in the sequel trilogy. Kylo, on the bridge, takes off his helmet. He looks at his father with an actual face, the face of a young man who has been wearing a mask for years. He says he is being torn apart. He says he wants to do something. He cannot say what the something is. He asks his father for help. And Han, who has spent his entire life never quite knowing what to say to his son, says yes. He says anything. He says whatever you need. Just come home with me. Kylo hands him the lightsaber. The blade is between them. And then Kylo activates the lightsaber, and it goes through Han's chest. And Han, with a final look of love and disappointment and recognition, touches his son's face and falls off the bridge into the reactor below. That moment is, by Snoke's framing, supposed to make Kylo stronger. Killing your father is supposed to complete your conversion to the dark side. Severing the last attachment is supposed to release the final restraint. But it does not work that way. The Last Jedi shows us, in painful detail, that killing his father has done the opposite. Kylo is not stronger. He is broken. He is hollowed out. He is sicker than he was before. The Force bond he develops with Rey across that film is, in part, a desperate reach for human connection, for the kind of attachment he was told would weaken him, but which is the only thing he actually wants. That is one of the most subtle and damning indictments of the dark side the saga has offered. The dark side, in its Sith framing, told its adherents for 1,000 years that attachment was weakness, that severing was strength, that love was a chain. And every time someone actually followed the doctrine to its conclusion, every time someone actually killed the people they loved, the result was not power, the result was emptiness. Anakin, after killing Mace Windu and the Younglings, was not strong, he was broken. Kylo, after killing Han, is not strong, he is broken. The dark side keeps making this promise. The dark side keeps failing to deliver on it. And the apprentices keep buying the promise, because the alternative, which is to face the pain rather than weaponize it, is harder. The Last Jedi gives us another scene, in the throne room of Snoke's flagship, that is one of the most dramatically loaded sequences in the trilogy. Rey has come to Kylo. She has come to try to turn him. Snoke is on his throne. He believes he has bound the two of them together, that he can use them both. He believes he has manipulated Kylo into killing Rey as the final act of his loyalty. And Kylo, standing beside Rey, holding his lightsaber, hearing Snoke's gloating monologue, makes a decision the audience does not expect. He kills Snoke. He turns his lightsaber and cuts Snoke in half across the throne. And for a moment, watching the scene unfold, the audience believes that Kylo has turned, that the Force bond with Rey has worked, that Ben Solo is coming back, finally, after everything, in the most surprising redemption arc in the series. And then, of course, the scene continues. Kylo and Rey fight Snoke's Praetorian guards together, back to back, in one of the most beautifully choreographed action sequences in the entire saga. And when the guards are dead, when the throne room is in flames around them, Kylo turns to Rey and asks her to rule with him, not as a Jedi, not as a Sith, as something new. He suggests they let the past die. He suggests they kill the past, if they have to. He suggests they leave behind every old story, every old order, every old name, and build something fresh together. Rey says no. Rey will not join him. Rey reaches for the lightsaber on the floor, the lightsaber that was Luke's once, the lightsaber that was Anakin's before that, and they tear it apart between them. The blue blade splits down the middle. The shockwave throws them both unconscious. And when they wake, Rey is gone, and Kylo is alone on the burning ship, and the Resistance is escaping in front of him. And the moment, the one window of possibility for him to become someone else, has closed. The Rise of Skywalker, the third film of the sequel trilogy, released in December of 2019 and directed by J.J. Abrams, gives Kylo his ending. The film is much debated. Many of the choices it makes are controversial, but the Kylo arc, the actual mechanics of his redemption, are clear. He fights Rey on the wreckage of the second Death Star. He is wounded. He sees a vision of his mother, Leia, who has died on Agen Kloss, to reach out to him through the Force. He sees, in his own mind, a vision of his father, Han, who appears to him as a memory, sitting on the wreckage with him. Han speaks to him with the same words Han used on the bridge in The Force Awakens. Kylo replies. He says, "I know what I have to do, but I do not know if I have the strength to do it." Han, in the memory, tells him he does, and Kylo, in that moment, takes off his black gloves. He throws his red lightsaber into the ocean. He becomes Ben Solo again. He goes to find Rey. He arrives in time to fight Palpatine alongside her. He gives his life force to bring her back from death, and he dies, smiling, holding Rey in his arms, in the temple where the final battle was fought. That ending is, in some ways, the most explicit redemption arc the saga has ever offered. Anakin's redemption was implicit. He saved his son. He died with peace on his face. But Kylo's redemption is shown in full. He chooses Ben. He gives himself up. He saves the person he has come to love. And the dark side, which had held him for years, releases him in the final hour. It is worth sitting with what that means. The dark side did not break Kylo. The dark side did not, in the end, win. The wound from Luke was real. The grievance against the Jedi Order was real. The years of service to Snoke and to Palpatine were real. The murders he committed, including the murder of his father, were real. None of these things are undone by his redemption. The bodies do not come back. But he becomes someone else in the final hours. He becomes the person his mother and father had always believed he could be, and he dies as that person. The sequel trilogy has been criticized for many things, but the Kylo arc, taken as a whole, may be one of the saga's clearest statements about what the dark side actually is. It is a relationship a person has with their own wounds. It is a way of carrying pain, and it can be unchosen, in the end, by anyone willing to put it down. The cost is enormous. The years cannot be unspent, but the door, even for Kylo Ren, was not locked. In The Rise of Skywalker, there is a moment the audience either accepts or rejects, depending on how they have felt about the sequel trilogy up to that point. The film opens with a holographic message broadcast across the galaxy. A voice speaks. The voice is unmistakable. It is the voice of Ian McDiarmid, the actor who played Palpatine in every prior film. It is the voice the audience last heard, decades ago in Storytime, screaming as Darth Vader threw him down the reactor shaft of the second Death Star at the end of Return of the Jedi. And now, on a transmission that the entire galaxy hears at once, the voice is back. Somehow, somewhere, Palpatine has returned. The film does not stop, for the audience's benefit, to explain in detail how this is possible. It gives us, instead, scattered hints across the runtime. Kylo Ren tracks the signal to a hidden Sith world called Exegol, deep in the unknown regions, a planet that has been the headquarters of a Sith death cult for thousands of years. Kylo descends into the chamber. He finds a frail, hooded figure suspended in a kind of life support apparatus, surrounded by tubes and machinery, half alive in a body that is barely functional. He finds, in vats around the chamber, other bodies, clones, failed clones, bodies that were grown and discarded, bodies that were the previous attempts. That is the answer the film offers. Palpatine, the man who told Anakin in the opera box about Darth Plagueis' ability to manipulate life and prevent death, has been using that ability for himself for decades. He has been growing new bodies on Exegol since long before his death on the second Death Star. The body that died on the Death Star was, in this telling, just the body he was occupying at the time. When the body died, his consciousness, his essence, his soul, whatever the right word is, transferred. It went to Exegol. It found one of the prepared bodies, and it began the long process of healing into that body, of stabilizing, of waiting for the right moment to return. That is the literal mechanism, as the film presents it, and as the wider canon has expanded on. But the deeper point, the one the film is trying to make even when it stumbles in the execution, is that the dark side does not die when the dark side practitioner dies. The Sith are a tradition. The Sith are a death cult. The Sith have been preparing for the death and return of their leaders for thousands of years. Palpatine's return is not an exception. It is the rule. The dark side is a continuous project. The faces change. The robes change. The titles change, but the project continues. The Sith Eternal, the cult on Exegol, are the keepers of this project. They are not Sith Lords themselves. They are not Force users in the traditional sense. They are believers. They are servants. They are the people who, for generations, have been raising the next vessels, building the next fleets, preparing the next return. They wait. They are patient. They believe in the inevitability of their cause. And when the Sith Lord falls, when Darth Sidious dies on the Death Star, they do not panic. They simply move to the next phase of the plan. The body is ready. The transfer is performed. The wait resumes. That worldview is one of the most disturbing implications the saga has ever offered. The dark side, in this framing, is not a temporary problem. It is an institution that has been planning for victory across millennia, with multi-generational succession plans, with hidden infrastructure, with cultic followers who have been raised on the cause since they could walk. The Republic took only a handful of years to bring down the Empire after the Battle of Yavin. The Sith took 2,000 years to plan the Empire's rise. The asymmetry is enormous. The dark side is patient in a way that no light side institution has ever managed to match. Snoke, the character played in motion capture by Andy Serkis across The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, is part of this same long plan. The Rise of Skywalker reveals that Snoke was never a real person. Snoke was a manufactured vessel, grown on Exegol, designed and programmed by Palpatine to serve as the apparent leader of the First Order during the period when Palpatine himself was not yet strong enough to appear. Snoke was a glove puppet. The hand inside the glove was Palpatine's. Every speech Snoke gave, every manipulation he performed on Kylo Ren, every command he issued to Hux and the First Order military was actually being directed by Palpatine through the connection between the Exegol body and the Snoke vessel. When Kylo killed Snoke on the throne ship, he did not kill anyone real. He killed a marionette. The hand inside the glove smiled. The hand inside the glove had been planning that exact moment for years. The First Order itself, which seemed in The Force Awakens to be a small fascist remnant operating out of the Outer Rim, is, in this final reveal, also a project of the Sith Eternal. The Star Destroyers, the Stormtroopers, the new Death Star planet known as Starkiller Base, the planet-scale superweapons that the First Order keeps building and the Resistance keeps barely destroying, are not the work of a small group of Imperial holdouts. They are the work of a multi-generational dark side cult on a hidden planet, building a fleet of Sith ships called the Final Order. Each ship equipped with planet-killing capabilities. Each ship crewed by Sith Eternal followers. Each ship designed to be deployed across the galaxy in a single coordinated strike to end the New Republic and establish a permanent Sith regime. That is the scope of the dark side's actual ambition. Not Vader walking down a corridor. Not the Death Star destroying Alderaan. Those were small operations by Sith standards. The real plan, the plan the Sith Eternal has been building for millennia, is the destruction of every major star system simultaneously. The imposition of total order through total terror, the final solution to the problem of free worlds in the galaxy. Palpatine, when he reveals this plan to Kylo on Exegol, describes it almost gleefully. He has been waiting. He has been preparing. And now, finally, the moment is ready. The fact that the plan is defeated, in the final battle of the rise of Skywalker, by a coalition of Resistance fighters and ordinary citizens and Ben Solo and Rey, is meaningful. The film, for all its narrative shortcuts, is making a clear point in that final battle. The dark side's long plan is undone, in the end, by an ad hoc gathering of beings who have decided to fight back. The Sith Eternal, with all their patience and infrastructure and ships, are no match for 1,000 small ships piloted by ordinary people who arrived because Lando Calrissian asked them to. That is the answer the saga gives to the dark side's long game, not a counterplan of equal scale. Just people, showing up, together, refusing. But the deeper point, the one the film is also making, and that has darker implications, is that Palpatine returned at all. The audience watched Vader kill him in Return of the Jedi. The audience saw the body fall into the reactor. The audience believed, for over 3 decades, that the matter was settled. And it was not settled. The dark side was not done. The Sith Lord had been preparing for his death for decades, and his death was not the end of him. He came back. He came back in a new body, on a new planet, with a new army, ready to do it all again. That is the most disturbing thing the sequel trilogy implies. The dark side, as an institution, does not lose. It only pauses. It only retreats. It only waits. The Battle of Endor, which the original trilogy treats as a final victory, is, in the longer view, just one beat in a longer story. The Empire fell, but the Empire's children regrouped. The First Order emerged. Snoke was deployed. Palpatine waited. The galaxy got 30 years of relative peace, and then the dark side, having quietly rebuilt, came back. And the new generation of heroes had to defeat it again, at enormous cost. And the question of whether the next victory will be permanent is left, in the saga's final frames, deliberately open. The dark side, in the wider Star Wars canon, is something close to a force of nature. It is not a phenomenon that can be killed. It is a tendency in the Force itself, in the galaxy, in the hearts of beings who are afraid. As long as fear exists, the dark side will exist. As long as loss exists, the dark side will exist. As long as institutions fail and people are wounded and grief goes unprocessed, the dark side will find new vessels and new champions and new long plans. The names will change, the robes will change, the lightsabers will be different colors. But the basic project, the project of taking pain and turning it into power and using it to dominate other beings, will continue. The Sith Eternal, in their hidden temple on Exegol, are just one expression of it. The Inquisitors were another. The Empire was another. Maul's Crimson Dawn was another. Even, perhaps, in some sense, Kylo Ren's Knights of Ren were another. Each new generation finds a new shape for the dark side. Each new generation thinks they have invented it, and each new generation discovers, eventually, that they have only stepped into a costume that has been worn before. That is the long view the saga offers, and it is, in its way, a strangely comforting one. Because if the dark side cannot be permanently defeated, the heroes who oppose it cannot be permanently defeated either. The Jedi fall. The Jedi return. Luke trains Rey. Rey buries the lightsabers on Tatooine at the end of the Rise of Skywalker and takes the Skywalker name as her own. The cycle continues. The next generation will face the next iteration. The galaxy is not, ultimately, saved or lost in any final sense. It is just lived in. And the question, at any given moment, is which side has the more compelling story? Which side is recruiting more effectively? Which side is offering the answers people are willing to hear? That is a more mature reading of the saga than the original trilogy, taken alone, ever suggested. The original films, with their black and white moral clarity, presented a story in which the Empire could be destroyed and the galaxy could be saved. The prequel trilogy complicated this by showing how the Empire was built. The sequel trilogy complicated it further by showing how the Empire returned. And the wider canon, the animated series and the novels and the games and the live-action shows, have been quietly complicating it for years, until the dark side, as it now stands in the Star Wars universe, is no longer a problem with a final solution. It is a condition. It is the chronic illness of the galaxy. And the heroes are not the doctors who cure it. They are the people who, in any given generation, push back hard enough to keep it from killing everyone. A stretch of Star Wars stories, set in the years between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, has been doing the patient work of showing how the dark side actually survives the death of an emperor. The Mandalorian, which premiered on Disney Plus in November of 2019, opens 5 years after the fall of the Empire. The galaxy is, on the surface, free. The New Republic is being formed. The Senate is being reconstituted. The rebellion has won. And in the corners of the galaxy, in the Outer Rim, in the dead zones, the Empire's old officers are still walking around. They have not been arrested. Many of them have not even been investigated. They have changed their uniforms. They have moved their operations into the shadow. They are doing, with smaller budgets and more secrecy, the same work they were doing before. Moff Gideon, the character played by Giancarlo Esposito beginning in the first season of The Mandalorian, is one of these survivors. He carries the Darksaber. He commands a remnant of the Imperial fleet. He has access to Imperial cloning facilities, and he is working, quietly across multiple seasons of the show, on a project that connects directly to Palpatine's long plan on Exegol. He is trying to use the blood of a Force-sensitive child to create new vessels for an empire that has not yet announced its return. He is, in effect, doing the same work the Sith Eternal are doing, in a different part of the galaxy, for what may or may not be the same final cause. The wider canon refers to this work in pieces. Project Necromancer, the Shadow Council of Imperial Holdouts, the cloning programs that Palpatine's followers were running to try to grow Force-sensitive bodies into which his consciousness could transfer. Some of these programs succeed, in small ways. Some of them produce the failed bodies that Kylo Ren finds in the vats on Exegol. Some of them produce the body that Palpatine eventually wakes up in. And all of them are running, all the time, in different parts of the galaxy, while the heroes of The Mandalorian and Ahsoka and the Book of Boba Fett are busy fighting smaller battles in the foreground. The dark side, in this era, is not loud. It is in the background. It is patient. It is, by design, almost invisible until the moment it returns. That is the most disturbing thing about the saga's depiction of the dark side as an institution. It does not need to be visible to be working. It can shrink, after a defeat, into something smaller than anyone notices, and it can continue its work in that smaller form for decades. The Mandalorian era is, in this reading, the chrysalis. The First Order, when it emerges in The Force Awakens, has not come from nowhere. It has been hatching, quietly, in places like the cloning facilities of Moff Gideon, in the Shadow Council meetings, in the patient work of officers who were never punished for their crimes, and who simply kept going. The galaxy thought it had won. The galaxy was wrong. The galaxy had only put the dark side to sleep for a generation. and the next generation was the one that had to fight it again. If this has been worth your while so far, a subscribe is the small gesture that keeps the channel going. Then we resume. A thread runs through everything that has been laid out so far, and it deserves to be pulled out and looked at directly before this video ends. The dark side, as the saga has built it across nearly 5 decades of storytelling, is not what most casual viewers think it is. It is not a magical color. It is not a team of villains. It is not fundamentally even a separate thing from the Force at all. It is a relationship. It is a specific way of using a power that is morally neutral in itself. And the relationship is defined, in every example the saga gives, by the same handful of qualities. Fear. That is the first one. Yoda, in The Phantom Menace, tells the young Anakin that fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. The line is delivered quickly, and most viewers move past it. But it is the closest thing the saga has to a complete theology. Fear is the precondition. Every dark side practitioner the saga has ever shown began with fear of something. Anakin feared losing his mother and then his wife. Maul feared being nothing without his master's approval. Dooku feared the corruption of the Republic. Ventress feared being abandoned again. Kylo feared being weak. The Inquisitors feared death. And the fear, in each case, was real. The fear was responding to a real situation. There was something genuinely to be afraid of. The dark side did not lie about that. What the dark side did was offer a particular way of handling the fear. Instead of feeling the fear and accepting it and letting it pass through, the dark side offered a method of converting the fear into power. The fear became fuel. The grief became fuel. The anger became fuel. Everything that hurt could be made to push outward, against other beings, against the universe, against whoever could be blamed for the hurt. And the more it was pushed outward, the more the fuel built up, and the more power the user could access, and the further they could push. That conversion, that mechanism, is the entire engine of the dark side, and it works. That is the part that needs to be acknowledged plainly. The dark side does in fact give people what it promises. It gives Anakin the strength to slaughter the Tusken Raiders who killed his mother. It gives Palpatine the political power to take over the galaxy. It gives Vader the physical capacity to walk down a corridor and kill everyone in it. The promise is real. The technique works. If the goal is to be able to do harm to people who have wronged you, the dark side delivers, reliably, every time. But it delivers on the surface promise, while taking something underneath. That is the gap that all the saga's stories about the dark side are trying to make visible. The user gets what they wanted. The user gets the power to hurt the people who hurt them. And the user, in the process of using the power, becomes the thing they were trying to fight. Becomes the source of pain rather than the receiver of it. Becomes the next person someone else will be using the dark side to take revenge on. The cycle perpetuates itself. Pain creates dark side users. Dark side users create pain. The dark side does not actually solve the problem of fear. It only spreads the fear around. The Jedi, in their best moments, understood this. The early Jedi teachings, the ones the films sometimes gesture at and the wider canon explores more deeply, were not about denial. They were about acceptance. Letting the fear be fear, without trying to convert it. Letting the grief be grief, without trying to push it outward. Sitting with the painful feeling until it changed on its own, the way feelings do when they are allowed to. That was the actual path of the Jedi, as the Order had originally conceived it. The path of being present with what was, without grasping at it and without pushing it away. The institution lost that. Over 1,000 years, the institution of the Jedi Order drifted from the practice of presence into the practice of denial. The discipline that had been about being with feelings became the discipline of not having them. The training that had been about accepting attachment as a fact of life became the training of severing attachment as a prerequisite for service. And by the time of the prequels, the Order had so thoroughly drifted that the original teachings were almost gone. The Jedi were saying the right words, but the meanings had drained out. That is why Anakin's fall is so devastating. Beyond the specific tragedy of his life, Anakin was the chosen one. Anakin was, in the cosmic structure of the Force, the being who was supposed to restore balance. And the Order that was supposed to train him had drifted so far from its own teachings that it could not actually give him what he needed. It could not teach him how to sit with the fear of losing Padme. It could not teach him how to grieve his mother. It could not teach him how to accept attachment as the source of love rather than the cause of suffering. It could only tell him that the things he felt were wrong. And so he went looking for someone who would tell him they were right. And that someone was waiting for him, with 13 years of patient grooming, in the office of the Chancellor. The tragedy of the prequels, in this reading, is not that the dark side won. It is that the light side, the actual light side, the practice the Jedi had originally been built around, was already lost before the war began. The war was not a contest between light and dark. The war was a contest between an institution that had forgotten its own teachings and an institution that knew exactly what it was. The Sith had clarity. The Jedi had confusion. The Sith had a coherent philosophy that had been refined over centuries. The Jedi had a code they could no longer fully practice. And in any contest between a clear false philosophy and a forgotten true one, the clear one tends to win. This is the deepest indictment the saga makes of the Jedi. Not that they were wrong about the dark side. They were right. The dark side is what they said it was. The path to suffering is what they said it was. The problem was that they had stopped being able to model the alternative. They had become unable to show, in their own lives and in their own institutions, what the actual path of the light looked like. They had become, in their own way, just as fear-based as the Sith. The fear of attachment, the fear of emotion, the fear of being moved by what was happening in front of them. They had been so afraid of the dark side for so long that they had become a society organized around the avoidance of feeling, and that society had no answer for a young man whose feelings were too big to avoid. Luke Skywalker, in Return of the Jedi, is the first character in the saga to find the original path again. He refuses to kill Vader. He refuses, even when the Emperor is throwing lightning at him, even when his father is wounded and unconscious on the floor, even when victory is one stroke away, to use the dark side. He throws his lightsaber away. He says, "I am a Jedi, like my father before me." And the meaning of that line, which has been mocked in some quarters over the years, is actually enormous. He is not declaring himself a Jedi in the Council sense. He is declaring himself a Jedi in the original sense, the sense the Council had forgotten, the sense that says love is not weakness, that the connection to his father, the attachment the Order would have warned him against, is the source of his strength, not its enemy. He chooses love. He chooses presence. He chooses to be with his father in the moment, instead of converting his fear into action. And the gamble works. His father, against all odds, turns. The Emperor is thrown down the shaft. The dark side, in the throne room, is defeated by a Jedi who finally understood what being a Jedi meant. That moment is the answer the saga gives to the dark side. Not a counterweapon, not a stronger version of the same fuel. The choice to not use the fuel at all. The choice to feel the fear and grief and anger and not convert them. To sit with them. To let them be. To trust that something on the other side of them is waiting. If the practitioner can hold long enough to find it. Luke holds long enough. Luke finds what is on the other side. And the dark side, in that one room, on that one night, loses. It does not lose forever. The sequel trilogy makes that clear. The dark side comes back. The Sith Eternal had been preparing for the return. Palpatine's body had been waiting on Exegol. The final order had been built in the dark. And by the time Rey and Ben Solo arrive in the cavern beneath the Sith Citadel, the dark side has been gathering for 3 decades, and only the same kind of choice Luke made. The choice not to grasp, the choice to love, the choice to give up the body's own life force rather than to take someone else's, can defeat it again. That is the cycle the saga keeps depicting. The dark side rises. The dark side is defeated by an act of love. The dark side regroups. The next generation faces it again. The cycle does not end. The cycle is the structure of the universe the saga has built. It is not, ultimately, a sad structure. It is just a true one. The dark side will keep returning. The choice to love will keep being available. And every generation, somewhere, has to make it. That is what the dark side of Star Wars is. Not a faction, not a magic system, not a fan club. A specific way of relating to fear, available to every being in every era, with predictable consequences for the being and for the universe around them. A way the saga has been depicting, with increasing depth and care across nearly 5 decades, in films and shows and novels and games and animated series. a way that has been embodied by some of the most memorable villains in the history of cinema, but that is also, the saga keeps insisting, available to anyone, including the heroes, including, in some quiet sense, anyone listening. The dark side is not a place you go, it is a thing you do, and the choice to not do it, the choice to feel what is here without converting it into power, is the choice the saga keeps offering, in scene after scene, film after film, story after story. The choice Anakin made too late, the choice Luke made just in time, the choice Ben Solo made in his final hour, the choice Reva made in the desert, sitting in her dark robes, weeping. The choice the saga, in its quiet way, is asking everyone who watches to consider. One final image should be sat with before this video ends. The very last shot of the rise of Skywalker. Rey, standing on the salt flats of Tatooine, in front of the Lars homestead where Luke Skywalker grew up. She has come to bury the two lightsabers she carries, Luke's and Leia's, the blue and the yellow. She buries them in the sand. She stands up. She looks out at the twin suns of Tatooine, setting on the horizon, the same twin suns that Luke once looked at, in the same place, when he was a young man dreaming of leaving home. An old woman appears behind her. The old woman asks her name. Rey hesitates. She has been called many things in her life. She has been called a scavenger. She has been called a nobody. She has been told, by Palpatine on Exegol, that her real name is Palpatine, that she is his granddaughter, that the blood of the Sith is in her, and she could take that name. The film has set up the option. She could accept the dark side's inheritance, with full knowledge of what it is, and walk into the desert as the last Palpatine. She does not. She says her name is Rey, and the old woman asks, Rey what? And Rey looks out at the twin suns, and the spirits of Luke and Leia appear faintly behind her, smiling, and she says, Rey Skywalker. That is the answer the saga ends on, not the elimination of the dark side, not the final defeat of the Sith, the choice of name, the choice of what to be, the deliberate adoption of a heritage that was not handed to her by blood, that she earned by who she chose to become. The Skywalker name, which began with a slave child on Tatooine, which passed through a fallen knight and a redeemed king, and a hermit master, and a princess turned general, ends with a scavenger from Jakku, who never knew her parents but who chose, in the final scene, who her family was. The dark side did not get her. The dark side reached out, all the way from Exegol, with the full weight of the Sith Eternal and the inheritance of generations, and it could not pull her. She buried the lightsabers. She named herself. The sun set. The film ends. The dark side of Star Wars is, in the end, a story about people. The same story, told 100 different ways, in 100 different characters, across nearly 5 decades of saga. The story of how good beings become monsters. The story of how monsters sometimes come back. The story of how the cycle continues, generation after generation. And the choice in any given moment is the same choice it always was. To grasp, or to let go. To convert the fear into fuel, or to sit with the fear. To take the inheritance, or to bury it in the sand. To name yourself Palpatine, or to name yourself Skywalker. To walk into the temple at night with a lightsaber, or to throw the lightsaber away on the second Death Star and refuse to strike. The dark side is waiting, always, for the moment of choice. It has been waiting since the beginning of the saga. It will be waiting after the saga ends. And the saga, in its long and patient way, is asking the audience to recognize the moment when it comes. To see the kindly old man for what he is. To hear the story he is telling, and to understand that the story is also a confession. To watch the doors of the opera box close behind a young man, and to know that somewhere in another life, another opera box is closing behind someone else, and somewhere a master is gently telling another apprentice another story that sounds like a fable, but is actually a roadmap to a death. The dark side is patient, the dark side is waiting, and the only thing, in any era, that has ever defeated it is the willingness, in the final moment, to refuse, to love anyway, to sit with the pain, to choose presence over power, to put the lightsaber down. And now, with all of that held lightly, let it go. Let the names blur. Let the planets blur. Let the lightsabers go quiet. The opera box closes. The sun's set on Tatooine. The hallway in the rebel ship goes dark, and stays dark, and there is nothing more to fear in it. You do not need to hold any of this. It is yours to keep or to release. Whatever piece of it stayed with you, that is enough. The rest can drift away on its own breath. Wherever you are, however you are listening, let your shoulders soften, let your jaw loosen, let the night carry you. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.